6 years after defeating Ganon, an ancient princess cursed to sleep forever, and the one piece of the Triforce hidden so well that an entire kingdom forgot it existed. While players curse at Iron Knuckles and rage quit in the Great Palace, they're missing something profound. Zelda II, The Adventure of Link, holds one of the deepest, most tragic backstories in the entire franchise, and most fans have never truly understood it. This isn't just about difficulty. This is about a narrative so carefully concealed that it transforms everything we thought we knew about Hyrule's golden age. Released in 1987 for the Famicom Disk System and 1988 for the NES internationally, The Adventure of Link became infamous as the series' black sheep. The side-scrolling combat, the brutal difficulty, the RPG elements that never returned. But while the gaming community spent decades debating whether the gameplay deserved its reputation, they overlooked something crucial. The story of Zelda II is fundamentally different from every other game in the series. It's not about stopping an immediate threat. It's about correcting a tragedy that occurred generations before Link was even born. The game's narrative operates on two parallel tracks that most players never connect. The first track is straightforward. Link must retrieve the Triforce of Courage from the Great Palace to wake Princess Zelda from her eternal slumber. The second track, hidden in the instruction manual and cryptic NPC dialogue, reveals a kingdom in perpetual crisis, a royal family torn apart by greed and secrecy, and a curse so powerful it literally changed how the monarchy named its daughters for centuries. What makes Zelda II's lore so mysterious in 2025 isn't that it's poorly explained, it's that the explanation exists in places most modern gamers never look. The instruction manual, which accompanied the original release, contains pages of backstory that fundamentally alter how the entire game should be understood. Without this manual, players experience a disjointed quest through abandoned palaces and hostile towns. With it, every location becomes a monument to failure, every enemy a consequence of royal hubris, and every spell learned a step toward redemption. Let's start with what happens on the surface. The game begins 6 years after the original Legend of Zelda. Link has defeated Ganon, rescued Princess Zelda, the Princess Zelda from the first game, and peace has returned to Hyrule. But peace is fragile. As Link approaches his 16th birthday, something impossible occurs. A mark appears on the back of his left hand, the crest of the kingdom, the symbol of the Triforce itself. This mark is the catalyst that sends Impa, Princess Zelda's nursemaid, into a state of shock and fear. Why would Impa be terrified of a birthmark? Because she knows what it means. She knows the legend that only descendants of her family, who have served the royal line for generations, are permitted to know. She takes Link to a door in the North Castle, a door that has remained sealed for so long that most citizens of Hyrule don't even remember it exists. The door that does not open. When Link presses the mark on his hand against this door, something ancient awakens. The door opens to reveal a hidden chamber, and within that chamber, lying on an altar, is a young woman in a deep, unnatural sleep. This is Zelda, but not the Zelda that Link saved 6 years ago. This is the first Zelda, the original bearer of the name, and she has been sleeping in this sealed room for countless generations, her existence a secret kept by Impa's family alone. The instruction manual provides the full horror of what happened. Long before the events of the first Legend of Zelda, when Hyrule was united as one country, a great king ruled with wisdom and power. He possessed all three pieces of the Triforce, power, wisdom, and courage, and used their combined might to maintain peace throughout the land. This was a golden age, a time when Hyrule flourished under benevolent leadership. But the king was mortal, and eventually he passed away. According to the laws of succession, the prince, the king's son, should have inherited everything, including the complete Triforce. But when the prince tried to claim his birthright, something went wrong. The Triforce split. He inherited only part of it. The Triforce of Power and the Triforce of Wisdom remained, but the Triforce of Courage was gone, vanished, hidden. Then, a magician close to the late king brought shocking news. Before his death, the king had told someone where the Triforce of Courage was hidden. He had confided this information to only one person, his daughter, Princess Zelda, the prince's younger sister. The prince immediately confronted his sister, demanding she reveal the location, but Princess Zelda refused to speak. She would not tell him where the Triforce of Courage was hidden, no matter how much he pleaded or demanded. The instruction manual makes it clear that she remained silent, even in the face of her brother's growing desperation. What happened next defines the tragedy at Zelda II's core. The magician, frustrated by the princess's refusal, issued a threat. He told Princess Zelda that if she did not reveal the location of the Triforce, he would place her under an eternal sleeping spell. Still, she refused. She would not speak. In his rage, the magician began chanting the spell. The prince, realizing what was happening, tried to stop him, but it was too late. The magician fought off the prince and completed the incantation. Princess Zelda collapsed where she stood, falling into a sleep from which she would never wake. And in that same moment, having expended all his power in the curse, the magician also fell and died. The prince was left in a kingdom of his own making, a kingdom without its most powerful artifact, without his sister, without the magician, and without any way to undo what had been done. Overcome with grief and guilt, he placed his sister's body in the secret chamber of the North Castle. He ordered that the door be sealed, never to be opened except by one bearing the mark of the hero. And he decreed that from that day forward, every female born to the royal family would be named Zelda, so that the tragedy of his sister would never be forgotten. This is why the Princess Zelda that Link saves in the first game bears that name. This is why Impa reacts with such fear when she sees the mark on Link's hand. This is why the kingdom of Hyrule in Zelda II is not a thriving realm, but a collection of scattered towns and crumbling palaces. The Golden Age ended generations ago when a prince's greed and a magician's fury destroyed everything the great king had built. But the manual goes further. It explains why the king hid the Triforce of Courage in the first place. According to the text, the king declared that not everybody could use the Triforce. It required a strong character with no evil thoughts and an inborn special quality that he had never found during his lifetime. The king recognized that even his own son might not be worthy of the Triforce's full power, so he made a decision that would echo through centuries. He would hide the Triforce of Courage in the Great Palace, deep in the Valley of Death, where only a true hero could claim it. The king created the 6 crystals and distributed them across Hyrule, placing them in 6 palaces. Each palace would serve as a trial, testing anyone who sought the Triforce of Courage. Only by placing all 6 crystals in their proper locations could the barrier protecting the Great Palace be lifted, and even then, the challenger would face the palace's guardians, the mighty Thunderbird, and a final test of characters so profound that it would determine once and for all whether they were worthy. That final test is Link's shadow, known in later games as Dark Link. After defeating the Thunderbird, Link enters a final chamber where the lights dim and a shadow peels away from his own body. This shadow mirrors Link's every move, possesses all his abilities, and represents the ultimate trial. Link must literally overcome himself, must prove that his courage is stronger than any darkness within him to claim the Triforce of Courage. This is why the king created this test. This is why the Triforce of Courage was hidden while power and wisdom remained in the kingdom. The king understood that courage without wisdom becomes recklessness, and courage without restraint becomes tyranny. The one who claims the Triforce of Courage must prove they have mastered themselves completely. When Link defeats his shadow and claims the Triforce of Courage from the sage who guards it, he doesn't just complete a dungeon, he fulfills a prophecy that has waited for generations. He unites all 3 pieces of the Triforce for the first time since the Great King's death. And with this complete Triforce, he has the power to break the curse that no magic, no priest, no sage could break for countless years. He awakens the first Princess Zelda from her eternal sleep. The game's ending shows this moment. Princess Zelda opening her eyes, the curse finally broken, Link standing with the complete Triforce. It's a moment of triumph, but it's also a moment of profound sadness. This Princess Zelda has lost everything. Her father is long dead. Her brother, who caused her curse, has passed away generations ago. The golden age she remembers is nothing but legend now. She awakens to a kingdom she doesn't recognize, to a Hyrule that has been in slow decline for longer than she was ever awake.
Now let's discuss the environmental storytelling that supports this narrative. The 6 palaces that Link must navigate, the Parappa Palace, Medoro Palace, Island Palace, Maze Island Palace, Palace on the Sea, and 3-Eye Rock Palace, are not random dungeons. They're ruins of the Golden Age, abandoned structures that once served the great king's kingdom. Each palace contains enemies that feel ancient and purposeful. Moas, Aches, Iron Knuckles, Wizrobes, all remnants of whatever defensive magic the king placed within them. The towns scattered across Hyrule tell their own story of decline. Rauru, Ruto, Saria, Mido, Naboru, Darunia, Old Kasuto, and New Kasuto. These settlements are insular and suspicious. The NPCs offer cryptic advice and require Link to complete tasks before they'll help him. This isn't just game design, it's a reflection of a kingdom that has been in crisis for so long that trust has eroded. When Impa tells Link the legend at the beginning, she mentions that Hyrule is on the road to ruin, that Ganon's death hasn't brought peace, that his minions still remain, seeking his resurrection. The kingdom is fractured, weak, vulnerable. This fragility connects directly to the timeline placement revealed in Hyrule Historia, Nintendo's official chronology released in 2011. Zelda II takes place in what's called the Fallen Hero timeline, the branch of the Zelda timeline where Link fails to defeat Ganon in Ocarina of Time. In this timeline, Ganon claims the complete Triforce and transforms the Sacred Realm into the Dark World. The events of A Link to the Past eventually seal Ganon away, but his influence corrupts everything. The Legend of Zelda and the Adventure of Link take place at the end of this timeline, in a Hyrule that has endured centuries of conflict, dark magic, and recurring evil. Understanding this placement is crucial because it explains why Zelda II's Hyrule feels so different from other games. This isn't the Hyrule of Ocarina of Time, where Castletown thrives and the kingdom is strong. This isn't the Hyrule of A Link to the Past, where the monarchy still holds some measure of control. This is a Hyrule at the end of its rope, where even the royal family's greatest tragedy, Princess Zelda's curse, has been mostly forgotten, where the secrets of the past are kept by a single family of nursemaids, where ancient palaces crumble into ruin and the greatest weapon against evil remains hidden because no one has been worthy to claim it. The instruction manual's prologue emphasizes this decay. After Ganon's destruction in the first game, it states that his vile heart left behind power that continued causing chaos in Hyrule. His underlings remained, waiting for his return. The key to Ganon's resurrection was Link's blood. The hero who defeated the King of Evil would become the sacrifice to revive him. This is why enemies pursue Link so relentlessly throughout the game. This is why every battle matters. Link isn't just completing a quest, he's in a race against cultists and monsters who want to use his death to bring back the greatest evil Hyrule has ever known. The 8 spells Link learns throughout his journey reinforce the lore's depth. Each town's wise man teaches Link a different spell: shield, jump, life, fairy, fire, reflect, spell, and thunder. These aren't arbitrary power-ups, they're knowledge passed down through generations, magic that once belonged to the sages and wise men who served the great king. By teaching Link these spells, the wise men are investing in the prophecy that Impa revealed, that a hero marked by the Triforce would come to restore what was lost. The experience system in Zelda II, often criticized as grindy or tedious, actually reinforces the theme of Link proving himself worthy. The king hid the Triforce of Courage specifically for someone with special qualities, someone who would grow stronger through trials. Link's journey from a 16-year-old youth to a warrior capable of defeating his own shadow is a transformation that the experience and leveling system represents mechanically. Every enemy defeated, every experience point gained, every level achieved in attack, magic, or life is Link demonstrating that he possesses the inborn special quality that King sought. This brings us to why Zelda II's lore remains mysterious in 2025, because the gaming landscape has changed so dramatically since 1987 that the way players access information has transformed completely. When Zelda II was released, the instruction manual was an essential part of the experience. Players would read the manual while the game loaded, during car rides home from the store, before bed. The manual wasn't supplementary, it was integral. Without it, large portions of the game's narrative simply didn't exist for the player. But as gaming evolved, manuals became thinner, then digital, then disappeared entirely. Modern re-releases of Zelda II on platforms like the Nintendo Switch Online service include the game, but often bury the manual in menus, if they include it at all. Players who experience Zelda II today through these modern platforms often never see the extensive backstory that the original manual provided. They play through the game experiencing only what's in the dialogue and environmental design, missing the crucial context that transforms the adventure from a difficult action platformer into a mythic quest for redemption.
This creates a fascinating disconnect. Hardcore Zelda fans who study the timeline and read Hyrule Historia understand Zelda II's placement and significance, but casual players who boot up the game on Switch expecting another Zelda adventure find themselves confused by cryptic dialogue, hostile townspeople, and grinding through palaces without understanding why any of it matters. The lore is there, but it's been separated from the experience. The manual's explanation of the sleeping Zelda, the prince's tragedy, and the king's wisdom provides crucial emotional weight to everything Link does. When Link enters a palace and fights through rooms of powerful enemies, he's not just progressing through a level, he's proving himself worthy of a test that a king designed centuries ago. When Link learns a spell from a wise man, he's not just gaining a new ability, he's receiving secret knowledge passed down through generations, magic that once belonged to an age when Hyrule was whole. When Link places a crystal in a statue, he's not just unlocking a barrier, he's fulfilling one step of an elaborate prophecy, one piece of a puzzle the king created to ensure only a true hero would reach the Triforce of Courage. Without this context, Zelda II becomes a frustrating gauntlet of difficult enemies and obscure progression. With it, the game transforms into one of the series' most emotionally resonant stories, a tale about correcting the mistakes of the past, about proving worthy of a burden that has waited for generations, about awakening a princess who sacrificed everything to protect a secret she believed was worth her eternal sleep. The introduction of Dark Link as the final boss carries tremendous weight when understood through this lens. Link's shadow isn't a cheap twist or a difficult final challenge, it's the ultimate question the king posed to anyone seeking the Triforce of Courage. Can you face yourself? Can you overcome the darkness within your own heart? Are you truly courageous, or are you simply skilled in combat? The king understood that anyone capable of reaching the Great Palace would be a formidable warrior, but the Triforce of Courage requires more than martial prowess. It requires absolute mastery of oneself, the ability to face your own weaknesses and fears and emerge victorious. When Link defeats his shadow, he's not just winning a boss fight, he's answering a question that has echoed through Hyrule for generations. Yes, he is worthy. He possesses the strong character with no evil thoughts that the king sought. He has the inborn special quality that the king never found during his lifetime. And because Link proves this, he gains the power to achieve what seemed impossible, to wake the first Princess Zelda and restore a piece of what Hyrule lost in that ancient tragedy. The narrative's influence on gameplay design becomes clear when viewed through this framework. The game's difficulty isn't arbitrary, it's thematic. Hyrule is in decline, under constant threat, filled with powerful enemies seeking to resurrect Ganon. Link begins weak because he's young, still untested. The grinding through battles, the careful resource management, the strategic use of magic, all of this represents Link's gradual transformation into the hero that prophecy foretold. The journey is supposed to be arduous because the stakes are generational. This isn't about saving Hyrule from an immediate threat. This is about restoring what a king's death, a prince's greed, and a magician's curse destroyed. Zelda II introduced concepts that would echo through the series for decades. The Triforce of Courage made its debut here, establishing the complete trinity of power, wisdom, and courage that would define the series' mythology. Dark Link became one of the franchise's most iconic enemies, reappearing in Ocarina of Time's Water Temple, in Four Swords Adventures, and A Link Between Worlds and beyond. The concept of Link possessing an inborn spirit that reincarnates across eras, the hero's spirit, has roots in Zelda II's narrative about a chosen hero marked by the Triforce. The game even foreshadowed Ganon's recurring resurrections. The manual explains that Ganon's minions seek to revive his master by sprinkling Link's blood on his ashes. This mechanic that Ganon can be resurrected even after death becomes a fundamental aspect of the series. In A Link to the Past, Ganon returns after being sealed. In Ocarina of Time, the timeline splits based on whether Ganon is defeated or successful. In The Wind Waker, the King of Hyrule floods the kingdom specifically to prevent Ganon's return. Zelda II established that defeating Ganon doesn't end the threat, only postpones it, and that concept shaped the entire franchise's approach to its central antagonist. The tradition of naming every Princess Zelda established in this game's backstory provides an in-universe explanation for why every game features a Princess Zelda. It's not laziness or coincidence, it's a royal decree enacted by a grieving prince who wanted to ensure his sister's sacrifice would never be forgotten. Every Princess Zelda throughout the series carries the weight of that first Zelda's choice to protect the Triforce of Courage, even at the cost of her own freedom.
What makes the mystery endure is that Zelda II never received the kind of retrospective attention other games in the series earned. When Ocarina of Time released in 1998, it redefined the franchise and became the standard by which all Zelda games would be measured. A Link to the Past enjoyed similar reverence, but Zelda II remained the outlier, the experimental entry that most discussions treated as a footnote, interesting for its differences, but not essential to understanding the series. This perception meant that when Hyrule Historia revealed the official timeline in 2011, many fans discovered Zelda II's placement and significance for the first time. They realized this game, dismissed as the black sheep, actually contained crucial lore that connected multiple games and explained elements of the series' mythology that had been mysteries for decades. The placement at the end of the Fallen Hero timeline gave context to why Hyrule felt so decayed, why the monarchy seemed weak, why ancient palaces dotted the landscape as ruins. But even with Hyrule Historia's revelations, the game's full narrative remained obscure to most players because the Historia didn't reprint the entire instruction manual. It confirmed the timeline placement and acknowledged the game's importance, but it didn't restore the contextual storytelling that the original manual provided. To truly understand Zelda II's lore, fans still needed to seek out the original manual or find it archived online, creating an additional barrier to accessing the complete narrative. For dedicated Zelda scholars, this treasure hunt became part of the game's appeal. Finding the manual, reading the backstory, connecting the narrative threads to the timeline placement, and understanding how Zelda II's story influenced future games turned into a rewarding research project. But for the average player, especially those discovering the series through modern compilations, Zelda II remained an enigmatic entry, notable for its difficulty and unique gameplay, but mysterious in terms of its narrative significance. The game's reputation as brutally difficult also overshadowed its storytelling. Players became so focused on surviving encounters with blue iron knuckles, navigating the Great Palace's labyrinth, or defeating the Thunderbird that the narrative context fell away. Zelda II became famous for its challenging gameplay rather than its tragic backstory, and this reputation discouraged many players from even attempting to engage with the story. Why analyze the lore of a game you can't finish? Yet for those who persevere, who reach the Great Palace, who defeat their own shadow, who awaken the sleeping princess, the payoff is profound. The ending takes on layers of meaning. Link hasn't just completed another quest, he's fulfilled a prophecy that waited for generations. He's proven the king's faith that someday a hero worthy of the Triforce of Courage would emerge. He's broken a curse that no magic in the kingdom could undo. He's given the first Princess Zelda a chance to wake to a world that, while diminished, has hope again, because a hero marked by the Triforce has proven that courage still exists in Hyrule. Looking at Zelda II in 2025, 38 years after its release, the mystery persists because the game asks more of players than most modern games do. It asks them to read supplementary material. It asks them to piece together cryptic NPC dialogue. It asks them to understand that the instruction manual isn't just a controller reference guide, but an essential component of the narrative experience. It asks them to look past the difficult gameplay and see the story of redemption and restoration underneath. This approach to storytelling, dispersed across multiple sources, requiring player investigation, rewarding those who seek deeper understanding, was common in the NES era, but has largely disappeared from modern game design. Today's games typically present their narratives within the game itself, through cutscenes, dialogue, and environmental storytelling. The idea that crucial plot points would exist exclusively in a manual seems archaic. But for Zelda II, this was intentional design. The manual's extensive backstory provided context that enriched the experience for players who engaged with it, while allowing those who wanted to focus purely on gameplay to do so, without mandatory story interruptions. The result is a game with one of the deepest lores in the franchise that most players never fully understand. The sleeping princess, the prince's tragedy, the king's wisdom, the curse that changed royal tradition, the prophecy of a hero marked by the Triforce, the test that the king designed to find someone truly worthy, the complete Triforce assembled for the first time in generations, the awakening of the first Zelda. All of this exists in Zelda II's narrative, but accessing it requires the kind of dedicated engagement that modern gaming has moved away from. When fans debate Zelda timelines or discuss the series' best stories, they often overlook Zelda II because its narrative is hidden behind difficulty and obscure presentation. But the story is there, waiting for those willing to seek it. It's in the instruction manual that most players never read.
It's in Impa's exposition at the beginning, easy to skip in the rush to start playing. It's in the cryptic dialogue of townspeople, easy to ignore when focused on finding the next dungeon. It's in the environmental design of the palaces, monuments to a fallen age. It's in the final confrontation with Link's shadow, a test of character disguised as a boss fight. Zelda II's lore remains a mystery in 2025 because the game never compromised its vision to make that lore more accessible. It trusts players to seek understanding if they want it, to piece together the narrative from scattered sources, to appreciate the tragedy underlying the adventure. For those who make that effort, who read the manual and connect the dots, who understand what the sleeping Zelda represents and why the Triforce of Courage was hidden, Zelda II transforms from a notoriously difficult action game into one of the series' most profound meditations on legacy, responsibility, and the weight of prophecy. The sleeping princess in the sealed room, the hero marked by fate, the test that waited for generations, the curse that changed a kingdom. These aren't just plot points, they're the foundation of a story about how the mistakes of the past echo through time until someone proves worthy to correct them. That story deserves to be understood, and that's why 38 years later, Zelda II's lore still matters, still resonates, and still holds mysteries for those willing to look beyond the surface and discover what the game has been trying to tell them all along.
Ganon's followers hunt for Link's blood to resurrect their fallen master. Towns harbor enemies disguised as innocent villagers. An entire settlement lies abandoned, infested with invisible horrors. And deep in the mountains, a massive palace sits, sealed behind a magical barrier, waiting for a hero worthy enough to claim the Triforce of Courage or die trying. Zelda II, The Adventure of Link, presents one of the darkest, most desperate versions of Hyrule ever depicted in the franchise. But the true darkness goes far deeper than difficult gameplay. It's woven into every character, every enemy, and every crumbling structure Link encounters. Most discussions of Zelda II focus on its punishing difficulty, its controversial departure from top-down exploration, or its unique side-scrolling combat. Fans debate whether the game deserves its divisive reputation. Critics point to cryptic progression and brutal enemy encounters as design flaws. But beneath these surface-level criticisms lies something far more unsettling, a Hyrule that feels genuinely broken, where hope has withered, where evil has infiltrated even the safest spaces, and where every character reflects a kingdom on the brink of complete collapse. The game's instruction manual establishes the premise clearly. Following Ganon's defeat in the original Legend of Zelda, peace seemingly returns to Hyrule, but when Link turns 16, a mark appears on the back of his hand. Impa reveals this mark opens a sealed chamber where a different Princess Zelda, not the one from the first game, but an ancient ancestor, lies in an eternal sleeping curse. Centuries ago, a king of Hyrule possessed the complete Triforce, but feared it might be misused after his death. He told his son and daughter about the Triforce of power and wisdom, but kept the Triforce of courage secret. When the king died, a magician close to the prince tried to extract the Triforce's location from Zelda. She refused. The magician cast a sleeping spell on her, dying in the process from the spell's power. The grief-stricken prince placed Zelda in the sealed room and decreed that all women born to Hyrule's royal family would bear the name Zelda, ensuring the tragedy would never be forgotten. This backstory sets the tone immediately. This isn't a kingdom recovering from crisis. It's a land haunted by centuries-old failures, where the mistakes of past rulers still curse the present. The sleeping Zelda represents more than a princess in need of rescue. She embodies Hyrule's paralyzed state, its inability to move forward, its deep sleep of hope itself. And Ganon? Though defeated in the first game, his influence permeates everything. The Game Over screen features Ganon's silhouette with the text, "Game Over, Return of Ganon." According to the manual, Ganon's followers remain active, attempting to resurrect him. The only way to bring him back is with the blood of the hero who defeated him. Every enemy encounter isn't just a random battle, it's part of a coordinated effort to kill Link and use his blood for resurrection. The constant spawning enemies on the overworld, the relentless palace guardians, the desperate ferocity of every attack, all of it serves a singular dark purpose. This transforms the entire gameplay experience. When players die repeatedly, when they struggle to progress, when every step forward requires life or death combat, the game isn't just being difficult, it's communicating that Link is genuinely hunted, that Ganon's shadow still looms over Hyrule despite his physical absence, that the forces of darkness maintain enough power to threaten total domination. The town's Link encounters reflect this pervasive darkness in disturbing ways. Unlike the safe havens in most Zelda games, several of Zelda II settlements harbor genuine threats. In Saria Town, certain villagers transform into H's, bat-like creatures referred to by other townspeople as Eyes of Ganon. These aren't random monsters that happen to wander into town. These are Ganon's agents embedded within the civilian population, disguised as innocent people, waiting to attack the hero. This detail carries profound implications. If enemies can disguise themselves as villagers, if Ganon's influence has penetrated even the populated settlements, then nowhere is truly safe. The towns that should represent bastions of hope, community, and civilization instead become spaces of paranoia and uncertainty. Which villagers can be trusted? Who might transform into an enemy? The game forces players to navigate this ambiguity with minimal guidance. The town of Kasuto presents an even grimmer picture. There are actually two Kasutos in Zelda II, Old Kasuto and New Kasuto. According to a woman in New Kasuto, the inhabitants fled their original settlement because of encroaching hordes of Ganon's minions. They established the hidden New Kasuto, concealed in the forest, and accessible only by using the hammer to clear away trees.
Old Kasuto now stands abandoned, infested with invisible moas that attack anyone who enters. Only one old man remains in the ruins, teaching Link the thunder spell when approached. Think about what this represents. An entire town forced to abandon their homes, their history, their ancestral land, because evil forces made it uninhabitable. The refugees establish a new settlement so hidden that Link must physically destroy trees to even find it, and even then they must conceal it from casual discovery. This isn't temporary displacement. This is permanent exile from everything they knew. And the one person who remained behind? Isolated in ruins, surrounded by invisible threats, teaching ancient magic to a hero who might be Hyrule's last hope. Old Kasuto stands as a monument to loss, to what Hyrule has become under the shadow of Ganon's lingering influence. It's not a dungeon filled with treasure. It's not a mysterious location hiding secrets. It's simply a dead place, a reminder that evil can destroy communities so thoroughly that they cease to exist in anything but memory. The enemies Link faces throughout his journey carry their own dark implications. The instruction booklet for the original Legend of Zelda described Darknuts as knights who live in the labyrinths, with lots of attacking power. Though Darknuts don't appear in Zelda II, instead featuring Iron Knuckles as the primary armored knight enemies, the knight-like enemies throughout the game raise unsettling questions about their origins. Iron Knuckles themselves resemble heavily armored warriors, wielding swords and shields with remarkable skill. They come in 3 varieties: orange, red, and blue, each progressively more dangerous. They fight intelligently, blocking high or low, striking with precision and responding to Link's movements with tactical awareness. These aren't mindless monsters. These are trained combatants. In later Zelda games, armored knight enemies have been explicitly identified as corrupted or brainwashed Hylians. In Ocarina of Time, the Iron Knuckle guarding Naboru is revealed to be Naboru herself, brainwashed and encased in armor. In A Link to the Past, the soldiers attacking Link in Hyrule Castle are described as knights corrupted by Aghanim's magic. The series establishes precedent for these knight-like enemies being former defenders of Hyrule, twisted into servants of darkness. While Zelda II never explicitly confirms this connection, the implication resonates throughout the game. Who would possess the training to fight like Iron Knuckles? Who would guard palaces with such skill and determination? The most likely answer? These were once knights themselves, guardians of Hyrule, transformed into guardians for evil. Every Iron Knuckle Link defeats might be a fallen defender, someone who once stood for the kingdom, now forced to stand against it. This reading transforms palace encounters from simple boss battles into tragedies. Link isn't just fighting enemies, he's potentially fighting the corrupted remnants of Hyrule's own protectors, warriors who fell defending their kingdom and now serve as weapons against it. The game never confirms this interpretation, but it also never denies it. The ambiguity makes it darker. Players are left to wonder who these armored figures truly are, what they once represented, what was taken from them. Even the common enemies feel more desperate in Zelda II. Moblins and Octoroks appear throughout the Zelda series as standard monsters, but in this game, they spawn constantly on the overworld, throwing themselves at Link with relentless determination. They're not just obstacles, they're hunting parties, actively seeking the hero's blood for Ganon's resurrection. Their behavior shifts from territorial defense to active pursuit, from random encounters to coordinated assault. This desperation extends to every enemy type. The Jerus throwing stones from high walls, the Zoras emerging from water to attack, the dealers dropping from ceilings, the bots that spawn endlessly in certain areas. None of them fight for territory or treasure. They fight because Ganon's followers have mobilized every monster in Hyrule toward a single goal: kill Link before he can complete his quest. The palaces themselves tell stories of failure and abandonment. These 6 structures, Parapa Palace, Midoro Palace, Island Palace, Maze Island Palace, Ocean Palace, and Hidden Palace, dot the landscape like monuments to a forgotten age. The game's instruction manual describes them as locations where Link must place crystals, but it never explains who built them, why they exist, or what purpose they originally served. The Great Palace offers the most profound mystery. According to the manual, it was created by the Great King of Hyrule to hide the Triforce of Courage.
This massive structure sits at the end of the Valley of Death, sealed by a magical binding force that only lowers when crystals are placed in all 6 other palaces. Inside, the palace extends far beyond what Link expected, a sprawling labyrinth filled with the most dangerous enemies in the game, including the dreaded Foka warriors.
The Great Palace represents past glory transformed into present trial. It was built by a king wise enough to hide one piece of the Triforce, powerful enough to seal it behind magical barriers, and paranoid enough to believe it needed such protection. But now it stands as the final gauntlet, the ultimate test of worthiness. The king created this place not as a gift to future heroes, but as a challenge. Only someone who can survive its horrors deserves the Triforce of Courage. This philosophy reveals something dark about Hyrule's history. The great kings who once ruled didn't create systems to help future generations. They created trials. They hid knowledge rather than preserving it accessibly. They designed challenges that would kill the unworthy rather than training grounds that would prepare heroes. The Great Palace embodies this approach, a test so brutal that most who attempt it will die, and only the exceptional will emerge victorious. The old men scattered throughout Hyrule reflect this same philosophy. These wise figures offer cryptic warnings, teach Link sword techniques and spells, but none provide comprehensive guidance. The old man in Rauru teaches the shield spell. The old man in Rudo teaches the jump technique. The old man in Mido teaches the downward thrust. Each offers one piece of a larger puzzle, but no one provides the complete picture. This fragmentation of knowledge mirrors the kingdom's fractured state. Information that could help Link has been scattered, divided, parceled out to different locations and different teachers. There's no central source of wisdom, no unified repository of guidance. If Link misses a town, fails to talk to the right person, or doesn't discover a hidden location, he can become completely roadblocked in his quest, unable to progress because he lacks a specific technique or spell. The game makes players feel this isolation keenly. When stuck, there's no friendly NPC who says, "You should visit the old man in the north who teaches a technique you'll need." There's no map marking essential locations. There's no journal recording important information. Players must discover everything through exploration, experimentation, or external resources like strategy guides. This design choice, whether intentional or a product of hardware limitations and early game design conventions, creates an experience that feels genuinely desperate. Link isn't embarking on a guided hero's journey with mentors preparing him for each challenge. He's stumbling through a broken kingdom, piecing together fragments of ancient knowledge, hoping he doesn't miss something crucial. The women in towns who restore Link's health and magic represent the only consistent sources of help. In each settlement, a woman in red offers to restore health, while an old woman in orange restores magic. These figures provide essential services, allowing Link to continue his quest. But even this help feels limited, reactive rather than proactive. They heal wounds already inflicted, they refill magic already spent. They don't prevent the damage, they just make it survivable. And the sleeping Zelda, this princess this entire quest aims to awaken, represents the ultimate tragedy. She's been cursed for centuries because she refused to betray her father's trust, because she wouldn't reveal the Triforce's location even under magical interrogation. Her virtue was punished with eternal sleep, her loyalty rewarded with endless unconsciousness. And Hyrule has been without her wisdom, her leadership, her presence for generations. The decree that followed, that all princesses would be named Zelda, was meant to ensure the tragedy wouldn't be forgotten. But what has this actually accomplished? Has it prevented similar tragedies? Has it made Hyrule stronger? The evidence suggests otherwise. The kingdom remains fractured, vulnerable, desperate. The decree memorialized failure rather than inspiring prevention. Link's quest to awaken her becomes more than rescuing a princess. It's an attempt to break a cycle of tragedy, to redeem centuries of stagnation, to restore what was lost when that ancient magician cast his curse.
Every palace conquered, every crystal placed, every enemy defeated brings Hyrule one step closer to breaking free from its paralysis. The shadow Link fights at the end of the Great Palace carries particular weight in this context. After surviving the palace's horrors, defeating the Guardian Thunderbird, Link faces his own shadow, a dark reflection that mirrors his movements, uses his techniques, fights with his abilities. Some interpret this as a final test of worthiness. Others see it as Ganon's shade manifesting one last time. But thematically, fighting one's shadow represents confronting the darkness within, overcoming self-doubt, mastering fear. After everything Link has endured, constant death and resurrection, brutal combat, cryptic progression, isolation, his final enemy is himself.
Not an external monster, but his own limitations, his own darkness, his own potential for failure. Victory over the shadow means more than defeating another enemy. It means proving that despite everything Hyrule has become, despite all the darkness and desperation and tragedy, the hero remains worthy. The courage to continue exists even when hope seems lost. The strength to fight persists even when failure appears inevitable. When Link finally claims the Triforce of Courage and awakens the sleeping Zelda, peace supposedly returns to Hyrule. The game ends with a simple image of Link and Zelda standing together, the curtain falling behind them. The curse is broken. The quest is complete. But here's what makes Zelda II's darkness so profound. Players have experienced the full horror of what Hyrule has become. They've died to Iron Knuckles dozens of times. They've fled from Fakas through palace corridors. They've navigated towns where enemies disguise themselves as villagers. They've discovered abandoned settlements like Old Kasuto. They've felt the desperation of a kingdom where even temporary safety feels precarious. The happy ending doesn't erase those experiences. It doesn't undo the tragedies woven throughout the kingdom. It doesn't restore the lost town of Kasuto or uncorrupt the fallen knights or heal centuries of stagnation. It awakens one princess and stops Ganon's immediate threat of resurrection. But the deeper problems, the fragmented knowledge, the isolated communities, the lingering corruption, those remain unaddressed. This is why Zelda II's darkness presents such a uniquely dark vision of Hyrule. Most Zelda games feature a clear crisis that gets resolved. Ganon invades, Link defeats him, peace returns, the kingdom recovers. Zelda II presents a kingdom already so broken that defeating Ganon's immediate threat feels less like salvation and more like temporary reprieve. Evil has infiltrated so deeply, damaged so thoroughly that even victory can't restore what was lost. The game foreshadows recurring themes throughout the Zelda timeline: the cyclical nature of conflict between light and darkness, the endless resurrection of Ganon in various forms, the perpetual need for heroes to rise and fight. But where later games often present this cycle with mythic grandeur, Zelda II presents it as exhausting, desperate, costly. Heroes don't just triumph, they struggle, fail, die repeatedly, and barely scrape through to victory. Link's unending burden becomes clear through gameplay itself. The quest never truly ends because the underlying problems remain unresolved. Ganon's followers still exist even after Link claims the Triforce of Courage. The corrupted knights still guard their palaces. The knowledge remains fragmented. The communities remain isolated. Link has passed one test, proven himself worthy, but the kingdom's deeper sickness persists. This reading transforms the Triforce of Courage from blessing to burden. The game asks, is claiming the Triforce of Courage truly a gift, or does it simply mark someone as worthy to bear the weight of Hyrule's never-ending struggles? Does possessing the Triforce of Courage mean courage itself, or does it mean being cursed to always need courage because the threats never stop? The Great Palace itself, massive, dangerous, designed specifically to test worthiness through suffering, represents this philosophy perfectly. The ancient king didn't hide the Triforce of Courage in a place where the worthy could easily claim it. He hid it in a place where only the most exceptional could survive to reach it. The palace serves not as a treasure vault, but as a grinding stone, breaking the unworthy and barely tolerating the worthy.
Failed heroes litter Hyrule's history, though the game never explicitly acknowledges them. How many others attempted Link's quest? How many died in palace corridors? How many fell to iron knuckles or Fakas? How many gave up after discovering they lacked a necessary technique, unable to progress, their quests ending in failure rather than death? The Great Palace and the 6 previous palaces stand as monuments to trials that most fail, challenges designed to eliminate rather than elevate. The cryptic NPCs scattered throughout towns reinforce this brutal selection process. The infamous "I am error" line from an NPC in Rudo Town perfectly captures the game's approach to communication. Obtuse, cryptic, forcing players to piece together meaning from fragments. Error isn't offering cryptic wisdom, he's providing a name that players must remember and share with a different NPC in a different town to progress. Miss this interaction, forget the name, and the quest becomes significantly more difficult. This design philosophy, whether brilliant or frustrating depends on perspective, creates a world where knowledge is power and ignorance is death. Link must discover everything through trial and error, through exploration and experimentation, through failure and learning. No one hands him solutions. No one provides clear guidance. He navigates a broken kingdom with broken information systems, piecing together a path forward from scattered clues.
The parallels to Hyrule's broader situation become obvious. Just as Link struggles to gather fragmented information, Hyrule itself struggles with fragmented leadership, fragmented communities, fragmented defenses. The kingdom's inability to maintain unified knowledge systems mirrors its inability to maintain unified anything. Towns exist in isolation, connected by dangerous paths filled with enemy encounters. Communities flee their ancestral homes rather than banding together to defend them. Heroes arise alone, without institutional support, forced to rediscover ancient techniques rather than being trained in them. This isn't how healthy kingdoms function. This is how dying kingdoms function. Scattered, isolated, defensive, reactionary. And that's exactly what Zelda II presents. A kingdom in its death throes, held together only by the desperate actions of a lone hero and the slim hope that ancient prophecies might actually mean something. The ending, then, isn't triumphant restoration, but temporary stabilization. Link awakens Zelda, claims the Triforce of Courage, prevents Ganon's immediate resurrection, but the underlying conditions that made all of this necessary, those remain. The fragmented knowledge remains fragmented, the isolated towns remain isolated, the corrupted knights presumably remain corrupted, the abandoned settlements remain abandoned. Victory means Hyrule survives another day, it doesn't mean Hyrule thrives. And that distinction defines Zelda II's unique darkness. It's the rare Zelda game that acknowledges survival and thriving are different things, that defeating the immediate threat doesn't solve the systemic problems, that heroes can win battles while the war continues indefinitely. The cyclical nature of conflict throughout the Zelda timeline, established in games like Ocarina of Time, The Wind Waker, and eventually made explicit in Hyrule Historia's timeline revelations, find its bleakest expression in Zelda II. Not because evil returns, but because evil never fully left. Ganon's followers remain active, his influence permeates the kingdom, his shadow looms over everything, even in death. Defeating him once wasn't enough, defeating him twice barely helps. The cycle continues because the conditions that allow evil to flourish remain unchanged. Link's personal toll manifests through gameplay itself. How many times does Link die in a typical playthrough? Dozens? Hundreds? The game tracks lives, allows continues, but the emotional weight of constant death and resurrection accumulates. This isn't a hero elegantly overcoming challenges. This is a hero desperately clawing toward victory through repeated failure, learning through suffering, succeeding through sheer refusal to give up after the 100th death. That's the true dark truth behind Zelda II's characters and world. Everyone, Link, the townspeople, the old men, even the sleeping Zelda, exists in survival mode. No one thrives, no one feels secure, no one can relax. The constant threat, the perpetual danger, the unending need for vigilance defines existence in this version of Hyrule. And perhaps that's why the game remains so divisive. It doesn't just tell players about a dark world, it makes them experience that darkness through mechanics. The difficulty isn't a bug, it's the entire point. The frustration isn't poor design, it's intentional communication. The sense of desperation, isolation, and struggle players feel while playing reflects exactly what Link experiences within the narrative. Zelda II forces players to ask uncomfortable questions. What if defeating Ganon isn't enough? What if heroism means endless struggle rather than triumphant victory? What if the best outcome is survival rather than restoration? What if some kingdoms are so broken that even the greatest heroes can only stop them from getting worse rather than making them better? These aren't questions most Zelda games explore. Most present clear problems with clear solutions. Evil invades, hero defeats it, peace returns, kingdom prospers. Zelda II presents problems without clear solutions. Evil infiltrates, hero struggles, victory barely comes, and peace remains uncertain. The sleeping Zelda awakens, Link claims the Triforce of Courage, the immediate crisis passes, but the screen fades, the game ends, and players are left with the uncomfortable knowledge that they've experienced not a kingdom saved, but a kingdom barely surviving, and even that survival required everything the hero had to give. That's the true dark truth beyond the game. Zelda II doesn't present a fairy tale where good triumphs and everyone lives happily ever after. It presents a harsh reality where good can barely hold ground against evil, where victory means surviving rather than thriving, where heroes sacrifice everything just to maintain the status quo. The characters aren't heroes and villains in a grand adventure, they're survivors and threats in a desperate struggle. The world isn't a magical kingdom waiting to be saved, it's a dying realm clinging to existence. The story isn't about restoration, it's about preventing complete collapse. And players feel all of this not through exposition or dialogue, but through gameplay itself, through constant death, through cryptic progression, through desperate combat, through the exhausting grind of simply trying to reach the next checkpoint alive. Zelda II's greatest achievement might be creating this perfect alignment between mechanics and narrative, where the difficulty communicates the desperation, where the frustration reflects the kingdom's fractured state, where the player's experience of struggle mirrors Link's experience of struggle, where gameplay and story fuse into one coherent statement. Sometimes survival is the only victory possible.
A sleeping princess cursed for centuries. A hero's shadow that materializes as the final test. And a tragic legend so profound that every princess born into the royal family would bear the same name forever. Zelda II: The Adventure of Link isn't just Nintendo's controversial sequel, it's a game that established some of the franchise's most enduring mysteries, introduced concepts that would echo through decades of future titles, and revealed a backstory so dark it would haunt Hyrule's royal lineage for generations. This is the complete lore and story of the black sheep that changed Zelda forever. When Zelda II: The Adventure of Link released in Japan on January 14, 1987 for the Famicom Disk System, players expected another top-down adventure like the original Legend of Zelda. Instead, they discovered something radically different, a side-scrolling action RPG hybrid that bore little resemblance to its predecessor's gameplay. But while the mechanics departed dramatically from expectations, the story provided something the original game merely hinted at: deep, tragic lore that connected directly to the first adventure, while expanding Hyrule's mythology in profound ways. The game takes place several years after the events of The Legend of Zelda. Link, now 16 years old, has remained in Hyrule helping with the kingdom's restoration after Ganon's defeat. The land is recovering, slowly returning to peace after the chaos the Demon King left behind. But circumstances are about to dramatically change for the young hero. As Link approaches his 16th birthday, he notices something strange. A mark appears on the back of his left hand, exactly resembling the crest of the Kingdom of Hyrule. This mysterious symbol wasn't there before, and its sudden appearance troubles the young warrior. Concerned about the mark's meaning, Link seeks out Impa, the nursemaid of Princess Zelda who aided him during his first adventure. When Impa sees the symbol on Link's hand, she's shocked and frightened. She immediately recognizes its significance, understanding that this mark signals something that has been awaiting fulfillment for centuries. Without explanation, Impa takes Link to the North Castle, to a tower that houses a door magically sealed for generations. This door has remained locked for so long that its purpose has faded into legend, known only to select members of the royal family who pass down its secret through the ages. Impa places the back of Link's hand, the one bearing the crest, against the sealed door. The magical barrier responds to the mark, recognizing Link as the chosen hero, and the door opens for the first time in centuries. Inside the revealed chamber, Link discovers a sleeping maiden lying on an altar.
The room has been preserved through magic, untouched by time, waiting for this moment. Impa reveals the maiden's identity. She is Princess Zelda, but not the Zelda whom Link rescued from Ganon in the first game. This is a different Princess Zelda, an ancient ancestor who lived long ago, and she is the origin of the titular Legend of Zelda itself. The story Impa tells Link is one of tragedy, betrayal, and a curse that has lingered for countless years. Long ago, during an era when wise monarchs of the royal family used the Triforce to govern Hyrule in peace and prosperity, a great king ruled the land. This king possessed profound knowledge about the Triforce, the sacred relic left by the three golden goddesses Din, Nehru, and Furore. The Triforce consisted of three pieces: the Triforce of Power, the Triforce of Wisdom, and the Triforce of Courage. Only when all three pieces are united does the Triforce show its true power, granting the wishes of whoever touches the complete relic. The king understood that the Triforce of Courage, the third piece representing the virtue embodied by heroes, was too powerful and too dangerous to leave accessible. If evil forces claimed all three pieces, the consequences would be catastrophic. To prevent this, the king made a momentous decision. He hid the Triforce of Courage in the Great Palace, located in the Valley of Death, on Hyrule's largest island. The palace was protected by powerful guardians and sealed with magic, ensuring that only someone with extremely noble character could ever claim it. The location was known only to the king and to one other person, his daughter, Princess Zelda. When the king died, his son, the Prince of Hyrule, began searching for the hidden third piece of the Triforce. He knew his father had concealed it somewhere, and he desperately wanted to assemble the complete Triforce to rule Hyrule with its full power. However, the location had been imparted only to his sister. The prince questioned Princess Zelda repeatedly, demanding she reveal where their father had hidden the Triforce of Courage. The princess refused. She understood her father's wisdom in keeping the Triforce hidden, recognizing that not everyone who seeks power deserves to wield it, even those of royal blood. Frustrated and angered by her sister's refusal, the prince sought help from a magician close to the throne. This wizard offered to use his powers to force the truth from Princess Zelda, believing magic could break her resolve where words and threats had failed. The magician confronted the princess, demanding she reveal the Triforce's location. When she again refused, he issued a terrible ultimatum. Tell him where the Triforce of Courage is hidden, or be cursed into eternal sleep. Princess Zelda, demonstrating courage as profound as any hero who would follow, remained silent. She would not betray her father's trust, would not reveal the secret that could lead to catastrophe if the Triforce fell into wrong hands, even if those hands belonged to her own brother. Her refusal to speak sealed her fate. In his anger and frustration, the magician began casting a powerful sleeping spell. The surprised prince, perhaps not expecting the wizard to actually follow through with such a drastic curse, tried to stop him. But the magician fought off the prince and continued chanting the spell, his rage overriding any sense of restraint or reason. The spell was wild, more powerful than the wizard could properly control. And when he finally completed the incantation, Princess Zelda fell where she stood, collapsing into a sleep from which she would never naturally awaken. The magical backlash from the uncontrolled spell killed the magician immediately. He died at the moment the curse took effect, his own magic turning against him due to its wildly arcing nature. The prince, suddenly confronted with the horrifying consequences of his actions, was filled with profound remorse. His sister lay before him in eternal sleep, the magician was dead, and the prince himself was responsible for bringing about this tragedy. Unable to reverse the sleeping spell, the only person who knew how was the wizard who had just died. The prince could only grieve. In his grief and guilt, the prince made several decisions that would echo through history. He had Princess Zelda placed in the castle tower's hidden chamber, laying her on an altar and sealing the room with magic. He hoped that someday, somehow, she would be awakened, that the curse might be broken by some future hero. To ensure this tragedy would never be forgotten, and perhaps in penance for his role in causing it, the prince decreed that all female children born into the royal household from that point forward would be named Zelda, in remembrance of his sister and her sacrifice.
This decree established a tradition that would continue for thousands of years into Hyrule's future.
Every princess born to the royal family would be named Zelda, creating an unbroken line of princesses all bearing the same name, each one named in memory of that ancient princess who chose eternal sleep rather than betray her father's trust. The Princess Zelda whom Link rescued from Ganon in the first game was one of these descendants, carrying on a tradition whose origins she may not have fully understood. Impa explains to Link that the mark on his hand identifies him as the hero chosen to finally awaken the sleeping princess. The crest appeared because the time has come at last for the curse to be broken, for the Triforce of Courage to be claimed, and for the ancient Princess Zelda to wake after centuries of magical slumber. Impa gives Link a chest containing 6 crystals and ancient writings that, she says, only a great future king of Hyrule can read. These documents are written in an archaic script that no one has been able to decipher for generations. When Link examines the scroll, something remarkable happens. Though he has never seen this ancient language before, he finds that he can read it perfectly, as if the words are speaking directly to him. The ability to read this forgotten script confirms his identity as the chosen hero. The scroll explains that the 6 crystals must be placed into statues within 6 palaces scattered across Hyrule. These palaces guard the path to the Great Palace, where the Triforce of Courage has remained hidden since the old king sealed it away. Only by placing all 6 crystals can the seal on the Great Palace be broken, allowing the chosen hero to enter and claim the Triforce of Courage. The scroll makes clear that only by uniting all 3 pieces of the Triforce, the Triforce of Tower, which Link recovered from Ganon in the first game, the Triforce of Wisdom, which has always been Princess Zelda's to hold, and the Triforce of Courage, hidden in the Great Palace, can Link awaken the sleeping princess from her centuries-long slumber. The complete Triforce possesses the power to break even the most powerful curses, including the sleeping spell that has held the ancient Zelda for so long. As Link learns all this and prepares to begin his quest, a new threat emerges. Ganon's minions begin attacking once again across Hyrule. Though Ganon himself was defeated in the first game and his physical form destroyed, his followers remain loyal to their fallen master. These servants of darkness have discovered a terrible ritual. They believe they can revive Ganon by sprinkling Link's blood over the Demon King's ashes. If they succeed, Ganon will return to life, and all the sacrifices made to defeat him will have been for nothing. The servants of Ganon spread across the land, seeking Link specifically. Their goal isn't just conquest or chaos, it's targeted assassination. They must kill the hero and use his blood in their dark resurrection ritual. This creates a dual urgency for Link's quest. He must claim the Triforce of Courage to awaken Princess Zelda, but he must also complete this mission before Ganon's followers can capture and kill him. The entire kingdom's fate hangs in the balance once again, and this time the hero fights not only to save a princess, but to prevent the resurrection of the most powerful evil Hyrule has ever known. Link's journey takes him across a vast Hyrule unlike the one from the first game. The landscape has changed over the years since Ganon's defeat. Death Mountain, which was located in the north during Link's first adventure, has somehow shifted to the southwest, becoming a complex rocky labyrinth rather than a simple mountain region. The world is not landlocked. Link must travel overseas to move from one side of Hyrule to the other, crossing dangerous waters and exploring islands that dot the sea. The land is divided into Western Hyrule and Eastern Hyrule, separated by vast bodies of water. Towns dot the landscape, each with citizens who need help, wise men who can teach Link new magical spells, and clues about the locations of the 6 palaces. Unlike the solitary adventure of the first game, Link now interacts extensively with Hyrule's people, learning their stories, completing quests for them, and gradually assembling the knowledge and abilities needed to reach his goal. The 6 palaces Link must infiltrate are formidable dungeons guarded by powerful monsters and deadly traps. Each palace houses a crystal pedestal where Link must place one of the 6 crystals Impa gave him. These palaces also serve another purpose. They're testing grounds that push Link to his limits, forcing him to grow stronger, learn new techniques, and master magic spells that will be essential for his ultimate confrontation in the Great Palace. Along his journey, Link learns 8 magical spells from wise men hidden throughout Hyrule's towns. These spells represent the first appearance of magic in the Zelda series, introducing a gameplay mechanic that would become standard in future games. The shield spell creates a magical barrier that reduces damage Link takes from enemies. The jump spell allows Link to leap far higher than normal, reaching ledges and areas otherwise inaccessible. The life spell restores Link's health. The fairy spell transforms Link into a fairy, allowing him to fly across gaps and fit through narrow passages. The fire spell enables Link to shoot beams of flame from his sword.
The reflect spell creates a magical barrier that deflects certain attacks back at enemies. The spell breaks curses and reveals hidden passages. And the thunder spell calls down lightning to devastate everything on screen. Each spell requires magic power to cast, drawn from Link's magic meter, another first for the series. As Link progresses, he can find 4 magic jars hidden throughout Hyrule, each permanently expanding his magic capacity by 1 container. This allows him to cast more spells before needing to restore his magic power. Beyond magic, Link also gains experience in this adventure, a unique element that has never been used in any other canonical Zelda game since. Defeating enemies grants experience points that Link can use to increase his attack power, making his sword strikes more devastating, his magic power reducing the cost of spells, or his life power allowing him to take more damage before falling. This RPG-style leveling system can raise each attribute to a maximum level of 8. Once an attribute reaches maximum level, further XP gains in that attribute award Link extra lives instead of increasing stats. The enemies Link faces are far more aggressive and powerful than in his first adventure. Moblins, Octoroks, and other familiar monsters return, but they're joined by new threats. Iron Knuckles, heavily armored knights with devastating sword techniques, Wizrobes who teleport around battlefields while casting spells, Focus, agile bird warriors who strike from above, Dyrus, axe-wielding crocodilian beasts, and many others. Each palace introduces tougher enemies, culminating in a powerful boss guardian that Link must defeat to place his crystal. The first palace's boss is Horsehead, a mounted knight that charges Link with a massive mace. The second palace features Helmet Head, an armored warrior wielding a ball and chain. The third palace's guardian is Rebenek, a mountain knight who dismounts mid-battle to continue fighting on foot. The fourth palace holds Karuk, a wizard who can only be damaged when Link reflects his own magic back at him. The fifth palace's boss is Guma, a massive warrior with incredible strength. The sixth palace features Barba, a dragon that emerges from lava pools to breathe fire.
After placing all 6 crystals and opening the path to the Great Palace, Link enters the most dangerous location in all of Hyrule, the Valley of Death. The Great Palace sits in the deepest, most remote corner of Hyrule's largest island, surrounded by the harshest terrain and deadliest enemies in the kingdom. The palace itself is a labyrinthine nightmare, the ultimate test of everything Link has learned throughout his journey. Deep within the Great Palace, Link confronts the Thunderbird, a massive avian creature crackling with electrical energy. This guardian serves as the penultimate test, assaulting Link with lightning attacks and tremendous power. Only by using the Thunder spell, turning the creature's own element against it, can Link damage the Thunderbird enough to defeat it. After an exhausting battle, the Thunderbird falls, and Link believes his quest is nearly complete. But as Link approaches the chamber where the Triforce of Courage awaits, the room suddenly darkens. The lights go out, plunging everything into shadow. Link's own shadow on the floor begins to move independently, twitching and twisting in unnatural ways. Then, in a moment that has become one of gaming's most iconic scenes, the shadow pulls away from Link's body entirely, rising up and taking 3-dimensional form. Standing before Link is his exact duplicate, Link's shadow, the first appearance of Dark Link in the entire Zelda franchise. This dark doppelganger mirrors Link perfectly. It wears the same green tunic, wields the same sword and shield, possesses the same combat techniques. Link's shadow is Link in every way except one crucial detail. It exists only to test whether Link is truly worthy of claiming the Triforce of Courage. This is the final trial, established by the old king who hid the Triforce in the Great Palace. To prove he possesses the courage, skill, and determination required to wield such power, Link must defeat himself, face his own strength turned against him, and emerge victorious. The battle against Link's shadow is brutally difficult. The Dark Reflection knows every technique Link knows because it is Link. It blocks attacks with the same precision, strikes with the same patterns, jumps with the same timing. Fighting one's own shadow means confronting perfect equality. No inherent advantage, no weakness to exploit, nothing but pure skill and determination. The shadow's agility is remarkable, dodging and blocking with ease while aggressively swinging and thrusting its sword, rarely dropping its guard. Players discovered various strategies to overcome this challenge. Some found that the shadow, despite its near-perfect mimicry, has one slight flaw in its jumping behavior. By positioning Link in the corner and repeatedly stabbing forward, players could sometimes catch the shadow as it attempted to jump in, turning an incredibly difficult fight into something more manageable. Others relied on the shield spec to reduce incoming damage, using Link's defensive magic to outlast his dark counterpart. Regardless of strategy, the battle remains one of the franchise's most memorable encounters, a hero forced to prove his worth by defeating himself. When Link finally lands the decisive blow, Link's shadow falls through the floor and disappears, dissolving back into darkness. The room brightens once more, and an elderly sage appears, the Triforce Keeper who has guarded the Triforce of Courage for generations, waiting for the chosen hero to arrive. The sage presents Link with the Golden Triforce of Courage, the third piece that has remained hidden since the old king sealed it away centuries ago. With all three pieces of the Triforce finally united, Link possesses the complete relic for the first time in Hyrule's recent history. The Triforce of Power, reclaimed from Ganon, the Triforce of Wisdom, held by the royal family, and now the Triforce of Courage, earned through trials that tested Link's strength, wisdom, and courage at every turn. The complete Triforce shines with golden light, its true power awakens by the union of its three pieces. Link returns to the North Castle, entering the sealed chamber where the ancient Princess Zelda has lain sleeping for untold centuries. Holding the complete Triforce, Link channels its power toward the cursed princess. The Triforce's divine energy washes over her, breaking the sleeping spell that has held her for so long. The magical slumber ends at last, and Princess Zelda opens her eyes for the first time in generations, awakening in an era far removed from the one she last knew. The curse is broken, the Triforce of Courage has been claimed, Ganon's servants have been prevented from resurrecting their Dark Master. The ancient tragedy that led to a princess's sacrifice and established a naming tradition for the entire royal family has finally found resolution. Hyrule is saved once again, and the legend of Zelda, the story of the ancient princess who chose courage over betrayal, has been given the happy ending she deserved. The ending scene shows Link and the newly awakened Princess Zelda together, the complete Triforce glowing before them. A curtain falls, and behind it, the silhouettes of Link and Zelda embrace, suggesting a romantic connection between the hero and the ancient princess he saved. It's an unusually direct romantic gesture for a Zelda game, hinting that perhaps Link's reward for his courage and perseverance isn't just the Triforce or the salvation of Hyrule, but also love. Zelda II, The Adventure of Link's story contributions to the franchise cannot be overstated. This game established the Triforce of Courage, completing the sacred trinity of power, wisdom, and courage that would define the series forever. It introduced the concept that Ganon could be revived or return after defeat, creating the justification for his reappearances throughout the timeline. It showed that the royal naming tradition of calling every Princess Zelda stems from a specific tragic event in history, giving the title Legend of Zelda literal meaning within the lore itself. Most significantly, Zelda II introduced Dark Link, Link's shadow made manifest, a dark doppelganger representing the hero's own power turned against him. This concept would return in future games, becoming one of the franchise's most iconic elements. Ocarina of Time features Dark Link as a mini-boss in the Water Temple, where he springs from Link's reflection and battles him in a surreal, fog-filled chamber. The Palace of the Four Swords in A Link to the Past features 4 Dark Links as optional bosses. Four Swords of Adventures makes Shadow Link a central antagonist, with Ganon creating endless duplicates to wreak havoc across Hyrule. Dark Link appears in Oracle of Ages, Spirit Tracks, A Link Between Worlds, Triforce Heroes, and numerous other games, each time bringing the same challenge: a hero must face himself. The game also introduced the magic meter, Link's capacity to cast spells, which became a standard feature in A Link to the Past, Ocarina of Time, and most subsequent 3D Zelda games. The concept of Link learning new abilities and techniques from wise mentors scattered across the world became a recurring element in future titles. Even the idea of a final boss that tests Link by mirroring his own abilities returned in Link's Awakening with the Shadow Nightmare, which forms partly from Link's inner nightmares. Despite these massive contributions to Zelda lore, Zelda II remains controversial among fans. Its radical departure from the original game's overhead perspective and exploration-focused gameplay alienated many players. The side-scrolling combat, while innovative, felt disconnected from what players expected from a Zelda game. The RPG elements of experience points and level grinding have never returned to the main series, suggesting even Nintendo recognized they didn't quite fit the franchise's identity. Most notably, the game's difficulty is legendary. Enemies are aggressive, damage is punishing, and death sends players back to the starting point, forcing them to trek all the way across Hyrule again.
This extreme difficulty, combined with the gameplay changes, earns Zelda II its reputation as the black sheep of the franchise. Many players never finished it, stopped by the punishing challenges and unforgiving design. Series creator Shigeru Miyamoto has stated that he considers The Adventure of Link the only Zelda game he views as a failure, primarily due to hardware limitations that prevented the team from fully realizing their vision. Yet, despite this mixed reception, Zelda II sold 4.38 million copies worldwide, making it the 5th best-selling Nintendo Entertainment System game of all time. While this fell short of the original Legend of Zelda's 6.51 million copies, it still represented tremendous commercial success. The game proved financially viable, even if artistically divisive. Zelda II's timeline placement adds another layer of intrigue to its story. According to Hyrule Historia, the official timeline document released in 2011, The Adventure of Link takes place in the Fallen Hero timeline, the branch of history where Link fails to defeat Ganon in Ocarina of Time. This timeline represents Hyrule's darkest reality, where the Hero of Time fell in battle and Ganon claimed the complete Triforce before being sealed away by the Seven Sages in what became known as the Imprisoning War. In this timeline, a link to the past occurs when Ganon's influence begins leaking from the Dark World, requiring a new Link to defeat him and use the Triforce to restore peace. The Oracle games follow, then Link's Awakening, then A Link Between Worlds, and several others. The Adventure of Link occurs near the end of this timeline branch, taking place several years after the original Legend of Zelda game, where Link defeated Ganon and rescued Princess Zelda. This placement means the ancient Princess Zelda, who sleeps in the castle tower, fell under her curse during an earlier era of this timeline, possibly during the Golden Age before the Imprisoning War, or during the era of decline that preceded Ganon's revival in the first game. The exact timing remains ambiguous, but what's clear is that centuries separate the sleeping princess from Link's era, making her awakening a reunion across vast stretches of history. The Sleeping Zelda's curse and the tradition it established also adds tragic poetry to the timeline. Every Princess Zelda in the Fallen Hero timeline, including the one Link saves from Ganon in the first game, bears that name because of an ancient princess's courage and sacrifice. They carry forward a legacy they may not fully understand, named in remembrance of a tragedy that occurred generations before any living person's memory. Looking at Zelda II from a modern perspective, its contributions to the franchise far outweigh its controversial gameplay choices. The game established crucial lore elements that remain canon decades later. It took risks with its mechanics, even if those risks didn't always pay off. It told a story of sacrifice, courage, and ancient curses that resonated thematically with the series' core values. And it introduced Dark Link, giving future games one of their most compelling recurring challenges: the enemy that knows all the hero's techniques because it is the hero. The Adventure of Link in Zelda II isn't just about saving a princess or claiming the Triforce. It's about confronting oneself, about proving worthiness not through destiny, but through trials to test everything a hero claims to be. Link doesn't automatically deserve the Triforce of Courage simply because a mark appeared on his hand. He must earn it by defeating 6 palace guardians, mastering 8 magical spells, and ultimately facing his own shadow in the ultimate test of courage and skill. The story also explores themes of consequence and legacy. The Sleeping Zelda suffers for centuries because of her brother's ambition and a wizard's rage. Every subsequent Princess Zelda carries her name as a reminder of what courage and sacrifice mean. Link must risk his life to prevent Ganon's resurrection, understanding that defeating evil once doesn't guarantee peace forever. The battle continues across generations, requiring new heroes to rise and face the same darkness in different forms. These themes of cyclical heroism, of courage tested through self-confrontation, of names and legacies carrying weight across centuries, became fundamental to how Zelda games tell their stories. The idea that each game features a different Link in Zelda, separated by generations but connected through recurring patterns of heroism and sacrifice, owes much to how Zelda II established the Sleeping Princess as a separate character from the Zelda of the first game, creating the precedent for multiple Zeldas across history. That's the complete lore and story of Zelda II, The Adventure of Link,
a game that challenged players with brutal difficulty and controversial gameplay changes, but gave the Zelda franchise some of its most important lore, its most iconic dark enemy, and a story of ancient tragedy finally resolved after centuries of waiting. From the sleeping curse that established why every princess bears the name Zelda, to the Triforce of Courage hidden in the Great Palace, to the shadow that tests whether a hero is truly worthy, this black sheep of the franchise earned its place in Zelda history by daring to be different while respecting the mythology it was building. And sometimes that's what legends are made of. Courage to take risks, even knowing some might fail, in service of creating something that endures long after the credits roll.
A princess who has slept for centuries, cursed by her own brother's greed. A hero hunted by an army of monsters who need his blood to resurrect the most powerful evil in Hyrule's history. And at the end of the journey, a final battle against your own shadow, a demon born from the darkness inside you. This isn't a fan theory. This isn't speculation. This is the real story of Zelda II: The Adventure of Link, and Nintendo never fully explained most of it. Zelda II is one of the most misunderstood, overlooked, and underappreciated entries in the entire Legend of Zelda franchise. Most players know it as the black sheep of the series, the game that went side-scrolling, the one that felt completely different, the hardest Zelda ever made. But here's what players have been missing for decades. Beneath that brutal difficulty, beneath those confusing side-scrolling corridors, lies some of the darkest, most tragic, and most lore-rich storytelling Nintendo ever buried inside an NES cartridge. And once you understand what's actually happening in this game, once you follow the thread all the way to its conclusion, the story of Zelda 2 transforms from a bizarre oddity into something genuinely haunting. So get ready, because today, the full dark lore of Zelda 2: The Adventure of Link is finally getting the deep dive it deserves. From the sleeping princess locked away by a grieving prince, to the ancient king who hid a sacred relic rather than trust his own heir, to Ganon's monsters crawling across Hyrule hunting a 16-year-old boy for his blood, this game is loaded with dark implications that Nintendo planted in the story and never came back to explain. Let's start at the very beginning, and the beginning in Zelda 2 is far older than you might expect. The world that players step into at the start of Zelda 2 is already a broken one. The events of the original Legend of Zelda are over. Ganon has been defeated. Link, the young hero who wielded the Triforce of power and wisdom against the Prince of Darkness, saved Princess Zelda and returned them to Hyrule. It should have been a time of restoration, a time of peace. But according to the game's prologue and its Japanese instruction manual, which contains some of the most detailed lore Nintendo ever wrote for an NES-era Zelda title, Hyrule was on the road to ruin. The power that the vile heart of Ganon had left behind was causing chaos and disorder throughout the land. His underlings hadn't vanished with their master. They were still there, waiting, planning, and they held a prophecy close to their dark hearts. The key to Ganon's return was the blood of Link, the valiant young hero who had overthrown the King of Evil. Think about that for a second. The moment the original game ends and Link puts down the sword, his life becomes a target. Every creature who served Ganon knows that if they can just kill Link and sprinkle his blood on Ganon's ashes, the Prince of Darkness rises again. According to Zelda Wiki, this mechanic is even reflected in the game's infamous Game Over screen, where Ganon's silhouette looms with the text, "Return of Ganon." It's not just a game over message, it's a threat. Every time Link dies, the implication is that Ganon's forces succeeded, they got the blood they needed, and the King of Evil walks again. Zelda Wiki notes something fascinating about this particular plot point. The act of Ganon's minions using Link's blood to revive the Demon King is a direct homage to Bram Stoker's 1897 novel Dracula, where the main antagonist was revived by having blood spilled onto his ashes. The developers were drawing from Gothic horror tradition. Zelda 2, even in its 8-bit glory, was reaching towards something darker and more thematically rich than most players ever recognized. This is a game about a teenager being hunted by an army of resurrected evil while he tries to save a woman who has been asleep for generations. That's not a children's story, that's a myth. So who is this sleeping woman? And why has no one woken her up before Link arrives on the scene? This is where the true dark heart of Zelda 2's lore begins, and where Nintendo buried some of its most tragic storytelling. 6 years after the events of the first Zelda game, Link approaches his 16th birthday. According to Zelda Wiki's documentation of the game's story, a strange mark appears on the back of Link's left hand, a mark identical to the crest of Hyrule's royal family. Alarmed and confused, Link seeks out Impa, the nursemaid to the current Princess Zelda, and what Impa shows him changes everything. Deep within the North Castle, behind a door called the Door That Does Not Open, a door that only members of the Impa family lineage know how to unlock, and only someone bearing the crest on their hand can actually open, Link discovers a chamber, and in that chamber, lying on an altar, is a woman in a deep, unnatural sleep. Not the Zelda that Link rescued in the first game, another Zelda, an older Zelda, a princess who has been sleeping in that room for so long that she has become legend. Impa tells Link the story, and it is, without question, one of the darkest pieces of backstory Nintendo ever put into a Zelda game. Long ago, when Hyrule was one kingdom, a united, powerful realm, a great ruler maintained peace across the land using the power of the Triforce. This king was wise. Hyrule flourished under his rule, but the king was mortal, as all kings are, and when he died, everything changed. His son, the Prince of Hyrule, was supposed to inherit the throne and with it the Triforce, all 3 pieces, the Triforce of Power, the Triforce of Wisdom, and the Triforce of Courage. But something extraordinary had happened before the king's death, something the king had done deliberately, with great purpose and foresight. The king had hidden the Triforce of Courage. He had taken the 3rd piece of the sacred relic and concealed it in the Great Palace, deep in the Valley of Death on Hyrule's largest island. He sealed the entrance with a binding force that required crystals placed in 6 separate palaces across the land to unlock, and he told no one about this, not his son, not his council, not his advisors, his daughter, Princess Zelda. Why? The scroll that Link later reads, written by the king himself, and encoded so that only someone bearing the crest, someone of exceptional noble character who had been raised correctly, gained many kinds of experiences, and reached a certain age could even decipher it. That scroll explains the king's reasoning. The Triforce of Courage, the king wrote, requires someone of extremely noble character to wield it. It cannot be given to just anyone, not even a prince, not even a king's own heir. The king feared what would happen if the wrong person seized the complete Triforce. He knew that if misused, it would produce many evils. And so, he chose to wait, to trust that one day, someone truly worthy would appear, and the crest would find them. That is both beautiful and dark, because it means this king essentially engineered a tragedy. He set events in motion that he knew might lead to suffering. He chose the distant future over the immediate present, and the immediate present broke apart almost the moment he was gone.
The Prince of Hyrule inherited the throne. He inherited the Triforce of Power and the Triforce of Wisdom, but he found only part of what he was meant to receive, and the missing piece consumed him. According to the prologue documented on Zelda Wiki, the prince searched everywhere for the Triforce of Courage. He was frantic, obsessed, and then a magician, a wizard close to the royal court, brought him unexpected news. Before dying, the king had spoken to only one person about the Triforce's location, Princess Zelda, the prince's younger sister. The prince immediately confronted his sister. He demanded she tell him where the Triforce of Courage was hidden, and Princess Zelda refused. She wouldn't say a word. Think about the courage, and that word is significant here, given what the Triforce of Courage represents, the courage it took for this young woman to stand before her own brother, the new king, and refuse his demand. She knew what her father's wishes were. She knew the Triforce of Courage was meant to wait for someone truly worthy, and she wasn't going to betray that trust, not even for the prince she grew up alongside. The prince brought in the magician to interrogate her. The magician threatened to put Princess Zelda into an eternal sleep if she did not reveal the secret. And even then, she said nothing. She held firm. She chose silence over betrayal. And the magician, in a fit of rage, or perhaps as a desperate gamble to terrify her into speaking, cast the sleeping spell.
The spell hit Princess Zelda. She fell into a deep, unnatural slumber, and according to Zelda Wiki's account of the story, the magic was so wildly powerful, so uncontrollable, that the wizard himself was killed by it the moment the spell was completed. The magician who had threatened Zelda died on the spot. There is something almost mythically just about that detail. The very curse the wizard wielded turned back on him, as if the universe itself punished the act. But Princess Zelda was still asleep, and the prince, now filled with grief and guilt, had no way to reverse what had been done. The prince couldn't wake his sister. He had caused this. His greed, his obsession with the complete Triforce, had led to a magician threatening an innocent young woman who was only trying to honor their father's dying wishes. And now she lay in an enchanted sleep with no cure in sight. According to the Japanese instruction manual, the prince was devastated. In his grief, he sealed his sleeping sister in the room at the North Castle, the room Link would eventually open 6 years after defeating Ganon, and gave a command that would echo through Hyrulean royal history for generations. Every female child born into the royal household would be named Zelda. That is the origin of the legend of Zelda itself. That is why every princess in Hyrule carries that name. It's not a tradition of pride or honor. It's a memorial. A prince who caused his sister's eternal sleep, who couldn't undo what he had done, who could never look at his kingdom the same way again, ordered that the name Zelda never be forgotten. Every female princess named Zelda across every Zelda game, every version of Hyrule, every era of the timeline, they all carry the echo of that one moment. One princess, one refusal, one spell gone terribly wrong. That's the dark lore Nintendo planted at the very foundation of the franchise itself, and most players have never stopped to truly absorb what it means.
Now, this is where the Zelda timeline becomes critically important to understanding just how heavy the weight of history is in Zelda II. According to the Zelda timeline, as revealed in Hyrule Historia, the official Nintendo publication, the adventure of Link is placed at the end of what is called the Downfall branch. This is the branch of the timeline where the hero of time, Link from Ocarina of Time, was ultimately defeated by Ganondorf. That defeat triggered a separate chain of history. That chain includes A Link to the Past, the Oracle games, A Link Between Worlds, and finally Zelda II: The Adventure of Link, which is the last game in that entire sequence. This means the sleeping Princess Zelda that Link finds in the North Castle has been asleep for an almost incomprehensible span of time. We're not talking years, we're not talking a generation. By the time the events of Zelda II take place, after Ocarina of Time, A Link to the Past, the Oracle games, A Link Between Worlds, the original Legend of Zelda, and then Zelda II itself, the timeline has stretched across what could be many centuries. The Hyrule of Zelda II is described as Lesser Hyrule, a reduced kingdom. The land has contracted. The great unified Hyrule of the distant past, the kingdom the old king ruled, has shrunk. The world has moved on, and through all of it, Princess Zelda has slept, in that sealed room, behind that locked door, waiting. She didn't choose this. She did nothing wrong. She was punished with endless sleep for the simple act of keeping her father's secret, and the only thing that could ever wake her, the complete Triforce, had been hidden so thoroughly that it took the chosen hero, after a chain of trials and battles across an entire version of Hyrule, to finally reach it. There is something profound and deeply melancholy about the image of Zelda lying in that chamber while the world transforms around her. Kingdoms rise and fall. Ganon appears, is imprisoned, escapes, is defeated again. New heroes are born, fight, and pass. New Zeldas are named, rule, and die. And in the North Castle, behind the door that does not open, the first Zelda sleeps on, untouched by time, unaware of any of it, waiting for a mark to appear on a young man's hand, waiting for someone worthy.
Now let's talk about the mark itself, because the way the royal crest works in Zelda II contains another layer of dark lore that the game barely explains. The mark appearing on Link's hand as he approaches his 16th birthday is not random. According to the scroll that only Link can read, written by the ancient king himself, the king had cast a spell on all of Hyrule long ago. The spell was designed to seek out a specific kind of person, a young man of exceptional noble character who had been brought up correctly, who had gained many kinds of experiences, and who had reached a certain age. Only someone matching that precise description would have the crest appear on their hand. Only that person could open the door. Only that person could read the scroll. This means the king designed a test that would run passively across all of Hyrule, potentially for centuries, until the right person appeared. The king couldn't know when that would happen. He couldn't know how long Zelda might sleep. He wrote his scroll in an ancient script that no one alive in Link's era could read, except Link himself, who finds he can read it despite never having seen the language before, because bearing the crest grants that ability. It's as if the king reached forward through time itself, encoded his last will and testament, and trusted that the universe would deliver it to the right hands. That kind of foresight, that level of patient design across generations, is staggering, and it makes the king of Zelda II one of the most fascinating and arguably most reckless figures in all of Hyrulean history. He chose to trust fate over certainty. He chose to subject his own daughter to potentially eternal sleep rather than give the Triforce to an heir he apparently didn't fully trust. We never learn the whole story of why he didn't trust the prince. Was the prince already showing signs of the obsession that would consume him? Was the king aware that his son didn't have the character to handle the complete Triforce? The game never answers these questions. Nintendo left them open, deliberately or not, and that ambiguity makes the backstory even darker. The father who loved his daughter enough to make her the guardian of his greatest secret, but in doing so, sealed her fate.
Let's step into the world of Zelda II itself, because the lore doesn't stop at the backstory. The land that Link travels through, this version of Hyrule, is dense with dark atmosphere that players often rush past on their way to the next palace. There are 8 towns in this Hyrule, 4 in Western Hyrule and 4 in Eastern Hyrule. And here is something that Zelda Wiki explicitly documents as a fascinating connection between Zelda II and Ocarina of Time. The names of those towns, Rauru, Ruto, Saria, Naburu, and Darunia, among others, were later used as the names of the sages in Ocarina of Time. The town of Mido shares its name with a character from Kokiri Forest. According to the in-game chronology of the Zelda timeline, since Zelda II actually takes place later than Ocarina of Time in the Downfall branch, the towns were named first and the sages were named after them. The people of Ocarina of Time's era were named after legendary places. It's a small detail, but it reinforces just how deep the historical roots of this version of Hyrule run. One town in particular carries a uniquely haunting quality: Old Kasuto. By the time Link arrives, Old Kasuto has been completely abandoned. The buildings stand empty. Invisible enemies called Moas haunt the ruins, creatures that Link can only see if he possesses the cross item, found in a later dungeon. Without the cross, Old Kasuto feels like a ghost town because it literally is one, full of invisible threats drifting through abandoned streets. The only person still living there is the final wise man, the last teacher Link needs to learn the most powerful spell in the game. Why is this man still in Old Kasuto while everyone else has fled? The game never explains. He's just there, waiting, perhaps as long as the sleeping Zelda has been waiting, for the hero to arrive. The world of Zelda II is full of these small, dark details. Towns that have clearly seen hard times, NPCs who give Link cryptic instructions or ask him to run errands that only make sense within the context of a kingdom slowly trying to rebuild itself after Ganon's destruction. A great cemetery that hides the entrance to the third palace, because of course there's a palace hidden in a graveyard. The constant presence of wandering monsters on the overworld who chase Link down, forcing him into battles he might want to avoid. This is a Hyrule under siege, not at peace. Ganon may be defeated, but his presence lingers like a shadow over every road. And the enemies themselves are darker and more varied than in the original game. The Iron Knuckle, an armored warrior that adapts its attacks based on Link's stance, forcing players to constantly change strategy, would return in later Zelda games, cementing its place in the franchise's rogues gallery. The Wizrobe enemy, the sorcerers who teleport and cast spells, similarly survived into later titles. These aren't mindless monsters. They fight with intelligence, they defend themselves, they attack strategically.
As Kotaku once noted in their coverage of the game, the more detailed graphics and bigger sprites made enemies appear genuinely menacing, and the evolved combat system gives them the ability to use the environment to their advantage. Now let's talk about the 6 palaces, because the palaces of Zelda II are not just dungeons. In the context of the lore, they are traps, or more precisely, tests within tests. The king who hid the Triforce of Courage built these palaces as guardians. According to the scroll that Link reads, the king himself constructed the palaces and placed guardians within them, specifically to prevent enemies from invading. Each palace holds a crystal that must be set into a statue's forehead to help break the binding force on the Great Palace. And each palace holds a boss that must be defeated before the crystal can be placed. The progression through the 6 palaces tells its own kind of story. Link starts in relatively accessible territory in western Hyrule, and must eventually cross the ocean to reach eastern Hyrule and the most treacherous regions of the land, including Death Mountain, which in this game has moved to the southwest and transformed from the relatively straightforward mountain of the original Legend of Zelda into a complex, labyrinthine rocky maze. The further Link travels, the harder the palaces become, the more dangerous the enemies, as if the king designed the trials to escalate to ensure that whoever reached the end was genuinely, undeniably worthy. Each town along the way houses a wise man who will teach Link a spell, but only if Link proves himself, often by completing a small side quest for the town's residents first. This structure reinforces something important about the game's thematic DNA. The journey to the Triforce of Courage is not just about combat, it's about service, about proving character, the very things the king's spell was designed to look for in the chosen hero. Link doesn't just fight his way to the Triforce. He helps an old woman find medicine for her sick daughter. He retrieves a lost child. He performs small acts of kindness for ordinary Hyruleans along the way. Each spell he learns is earned through connection with the people of the land, not just through power. That's the vision the king had, encoded into the very structure of the game's progression. A worthy person isn't just strong, they're kind, they're helpful, they take care of the people around them. And so the path to the Triforce of Courage, the Triforce most closely associated with Link across the entire Zelda series, is paved with exactly that kind of character.
And then there is the Great Palace, and Thunderbird, and Dark Link. After Link places all 6 crystals in the 6 palaces, the way to the Great Palace opens in the Valley of Death. This is the end game, the final test, and it is, by design, the most brutal dungeon in the entire game, possibly in the entire NES-era Zelda catalog. The Great Palace is longer, harder, and more relentless than anything that came before it. Link cannot simply run through it. He must fight through it, survive it, push through it with everything the journey has built in him. The penultimate boss of the Great Palace is Thunderbird, a massive, flying creature that rains down fireballs from above. According to Zelda Wiki, Thunderbird is invulnerable to sword attacks unless Link first hits it with the Thunder spell. Players who reach this fight without knowing this mechanic will find themselves in an apparently unwinnable battle. The invincibility is absolute. The sword passes right through the creature, as if Link's blade can't touch something that exists on a different plane. Only the spell, which requires magic power to cast, can bring Thunderbird down to a level where steel can reach it. It's as if even the final boss of the penultimate chamber is testing Link's preparation, his wisdom, his use of everything he's learned. Did you learn the Thunder spell? Did you manage your magic carefully? Have you truly mastered everything the journey taught you? And then, after Thunderbird falls, a small old man appears, the Triforce Keeper. And instead of simply handing Link the Triforce of Courage, he summons a final challenge. Dark Link. A shadowy doppelganger of Link himself steps out of the darkness. According to Zelda Wiki's documentation of this boss, Dark Link copies all of Link's abilities. He is Link's own shadow given form, given will, given the capacity to fight. He attacks exactly as Link attacks. He defends exactly as Link defends. He mirrors every movement. He is, in the most literal sense possible, a fight against yourself. Zelda Wiki notes something profound about Dark Link's narrative placement. He is never described as one of Ganon's servants. He's not a minion sent to stop Link. He's not a guardian placed by the king in the same way the palace guardians were. The most likely interpretation, according to the wiki, is that Dark Link was a final test left for Link by the great king of Hyrule himself, possibly evidenced by the Triforce Keeper's actions in summoning him. A test of the self. A test of whether the worthy hero can face his own darkness and overcome it. Dark Link loses, and in losing, he affirms something about Link that the entire game has been building toward. This hero is worthy. This hero is the answer to a prayer the ancient king made centuries ago. This hero can carry the Triforce of Courage.
Now let's step back and look at the full scope of what Zelda II established for the franchise. Because the dark lore of this game didn't just matter in 1988, it shaped the entire Legend of Zelda series going forward, and most players don't connect the dots. According to Zelda Wiki's breakdown of the game's legacy and contributions, Zelda II was directly responsible for establishing that Ganon could be revived after his defeat, a concept that became foundational to the Zelda series. Every subsequent time Ganon has returned, every time fans have wondered how the Prince of Darkness came back from apparent destruction, the precedent was set right here. Ganon is not easy to kill permanently. His power lingers, his servants remain. There will always be a path to his revival, unless the circumstances are exactly right. Zelda II also introduced the complete Triforce. While the original Legend of Zelda featured the Triforce of Power and the Triforce of Wisdom, the third piece, the Triforce of Courage, made its first appearance in this game. And crucially, the game showed what the complete Triforce looks like for the very first time. The golden triangle appears in the Japanese version's box art and in the ending credits. The idea that Link is the bearer of the Triforce of Courage, that his piece of the relic is courage, became one of the most enduring and defining concepts in the franchise. Every time a Zelda game calls Link the chosen hero, or shows the Triforce emblem on the back of his hand, or ties his destiny to the golden relic, it's drawing directly from the lore first established in Zelda II. The magic meter, the concept of Link using magical spells with a finite resource that must be managed, introduced in Zelda II and carried forward through the entire series. Ocarina of Time's magic system, A Link to the Past's magic jars, Majora's Mask's spell transformations, all descendants of the system first built in this 1987 NES game. And Dark Link himself, the shadowy doppelganger who mirrors every movement, every attack, every defense, Dark Link became one of the most iconic recurring elements in the franchise. His most famous reappearance came in Ocarina of Time, in the haunting, flooded room of the Water Temple, where a version of Dark Link faces adult Link in one of the most memorable and atmospheric boss encounters in gaming history. Shadow Link appears again in Four Swords Adventures. Another version appears in Spirit Tracks. In A Link Between Worlds, the Street Pass battle mode was directly inspired by the final fight of Zelda II, with one player controlling Link and another controlling Shadow Link. The concept of Link fighting his own shadow, his own darkness, his own potential corruption, that theme has echoed through the franchise for decades. And it started here, in the Great Palace, in 1987, in a game most people wrote off as the weird Black Sheep sequel.
Let's talk about something else Nintendo left unexplained. The question of what happens to the Prince of Hyrule. We know his story up to the point where he seals his sleeping sister in the North Castle and commands that all royal daughters be named Zelda. But what happens to him? He was the king. He lost his sister to an enchantment caused by his own greed and obsession. His kingdom entered what is called the Era of Decline, the very period that Zelda Wiki documents as the context for Zelda II's backstory. The Era of Decline was ushered in by the prince's inability to claim the complete Triforce and by the chaos that followed the king's death. The prince presumably ruled. He presumably tried to govern a kingdom that was slowly destabilizing, that would eventually see Ganon revived and wreak havoc across the land. He ordered that door sealed in the North Castle, and the Impa family, Impa's lineage, the same bloodline that produces the caretaker Impa who appears in Zelda II, was apparently tasked with knowing how to open it, a generational responsibility passed down through one family line to guard the secret of the sleeping princess. Impa knows the story in Zelda II because her family has been keeping it for generations. Think about what that means for the Impa lineage. They've known for centuries that a princess lies sleeping in the North Castle. They've known the whole tragic story, the prince's guilt, the magician's fatal rage, the king's hidden plan. They've guarded that secret, kept watch over that door, and waited for the right mark to appear on the right young man's hand. And when Link shows up on Impa's doorstep at the start of Zelda II with the crest glowing on his hand, she recognizes it immediately. She's been waiting her whole life for this. Her family has been waiting for generations. That's a depth of loyalty, of purpose, of generational duty that the game barely surfaces. Impa in Zelda II is a relatively minor character in terms of screen time. She tells Link the story, gives him the crystals and the scroll, and sends him off. But the weight of what she carries, the centuries of family obligation she represents, makes her quietly one of the most significant figures in Zelda II's lore.
And now let's go to the most darkly fascinating and completely unexplained element of Zelda II's world, the game over screen. When Link dies in Zelda II, and he will die many times because this is the hardest game in the franchise, the game over screen appears. In the English NES version, it shows the silhouette of Ganon from the chest up and displays the text, Game Over, followed by Return of Ganon. That's it. No cutscene, no explanation, just Ganon's looming shadow and those 3 words. In the Famicom Disk System version, the original Japanese release, the screen is simpler, a plain black screen with the text, but the meaning is the same. When Link dies, Ganon returns. And according to the story as documented on Zelda Wiki, this isn't metaphorical. The lore establishes that Ganon's minions need Link's blood specifically to revive their master. A game over represents the logical conclusion of that story thread. Link was caught, Link was killed, Link's blood was used, and the Prince of Darkness rises once again. Zelda II is the only game in the main Zelda series where a game over has a specific, canon, lore-driven consequence embedded in its visual design. In other Zelda games, dying and getting a game over is simply a gameplay failure state. In Zelda II, it's Hyrule's worst nightmare coming true, the very thing that every good person in the kingdom is trying to prevent. The stakes couldn't be higher, and the game communicates them not through story text or cutscenes, but through a single haunting image and 4 words that appear every time you fail. That design choice is remarkable. It was released in Japan in 1987, an era when video game narrative was still in its infancy, when most games communicated story through short text blurbs and instruction manuals. And yet, the developers of Zelda II built a consequence into the failure state that serves as a constant reminder of what the entire quest is about. Every death isn't just a setback, it's a catastrophe. Be better. Try harder. Hyrule is counting on you.
The ending of Zelda II is famously brief and famously enigmatic, and it contains one more dark implication that gets overlooked in conversations about the game. After defeating Dark Link and receiving the Triforce of Courage from the Triforce Keeper, Link reunites all 3 pieces of the sacred relic. He returns to the Northern Palace where the sleeping Zelda lies on her altar. The power of the complete Triforce washes over her, and she wakes. After centuries of enchanted sleep, after ages of darkness and waiting and the endless turning of Hyrulean history, Princess Zelda opens her eyes. The game ends with Link and Zelda embracing as a curtain falls in front of them. It's a famous moment, and the curtain has been interpreted as everything from a modest discretion shot to a knowing wink from the developers. But the ending is notably sparse in its resolution. We don't see what happens next. We don't know what a princess who has slept for potentially centuries does when she wakes up. We don't know how she processes the loss of everything she knew. The world she woke up in is not the world she fell asleep in. Her brother is long dead. The kingdom he ruled has contracted into something smaller.
the world is entirely different. Zelda Wiki notes that it is unknown what occurs in Hyrule after the adventure of Link, though it is implied to be at forever peace, suggesting that the complete Triforce wielded by the worthy Link brought a lasting resolution to the era of decline and struggle. But the personal story of Princess Zelda I, the original Zelda, the one who chose silence over betrayal and paid for it with centuries of sleep, her story ends with an embrace and a curtain. We never know how she feels. We never know what she thinks of the world she's woken into. We never know if she ever learns the full truth of how long she slept. Nintendo gave us the victory. They withheld the aftermath. And that withholding is, in its own way, another piece of dark lore, because the questions it leaves unanswered are profound. The princess who sacrificed everything to protect her father's wishes finally gets to wake up. But what does she wake up to? The game doesn't say. It never will.
Zelda II: The Adventure of Link is not, when you look at it clearly, just the black sheep of the Zelda franchise. It's the origin story. The sleeping princess whose name became legend. The ancient king who hid a sacred relic from his own heir because he was looking for something better, something worthy. The prince destroyed by his own greed. The magician who died from his own curse. The Triforce made complete for the very first time. The hero hunting himself in a dark palace at the end of the world. The name Zelda itself, carried by every princess ever since as a memorial to the first girl who refused to break. This game planted seeds that grew into the entire Legend of Zelda franchise as fans know it today. The Triforce of Courage, Ganon's resurrection, Dark Link, the magic system, the idea that true heroism isn't just about fighting, it's about character, about service, about facing your own shadow and winning. All of it, right here, buried in an NES cartridge from 1987 that most people still dismiss as the weird one. The dark lore of Zelda II: The Adventure of Link has been waiting, just like its sleeping princess, for someone to finally wake it up. And now that the story has been told in full, take a moment to think about what Nintendo built all those decades ago. Think about the old king who loved his daughter enough to trust her with his greatest secret and didn't realize he was condemning her. Think about the name Zelda, spoken in every game, every generation, never explained, never contextualized, simply carried forward as tradition, when in truth, it is a memorial to a tragedy. Think about Dark Link waiting in that final room, born from Link's own shadow, asking the question that the entire game was always really asking. Are you worthy? Do you have enough courage? Not just to fight the monsters, not just to collect the crystals, but to face the darkness inside yourself and overcome it. If you do, the princess wakes, the Triforce shines, and Hyrule at last knows peace. That is the dark lore of Zelda II: The Adventure of Link, and Nintendo never fully explained any of it because some stories are better when they leave the shadows in place. A woman has been sleeping in a sealed tower for centuries, and nobody was supposed to know she existed. Not the scholars, not the citizens, not even the royal court that continued to operate in her kingdom. She was hidden away behind a magically locked door, placed there by a grief-stricken prince who caused her curse and could never undo it. And yet, everything in Hyrule, everything, including the very name of every princess who came after her, was shaped by what happened to her in that room. This is the story of the original Princess Zelda, not the one who hid the Triforce of Wisdom, not the one Link rescued from Ganon in the first game. We're talking about an older Zelda, a princess whose tragedy is so deep, so layered, and so central to the entire mythology of the Zelda series that the game named after her can barely contain it. Because here's the thing players often miss. Zelda II: The Adventure of Link is not simply a quest to collect the Triforce of Courage. It is a reckoning. It is a kingdom atoning for the sins of a prince who let ambition destroy the one person who stood in his way. It is a bloodline trying desperately to redeem an ancient, irreversible mistake. And it begins with a door that should never have been sealed, and a girl who should never have been put to sleep.
Strap in, because once you understand the full story behind this sleeping princess, the king's impossible choice, the prince's obsession, the sorcerer's rage, and the mark that would only appear on the hand of someone worthy enough to fix it all, you will never look at Zelda II or at the Zelda series itself the same way again.
Let's set the stage, because to truly understand how dark this story is, you have to understand what the world looked like before things went wrong. According to Zelda Wiki, the Downfall timeline, the branch of Hyrulean history where the adventure of Link takes place, arrives at a critical turning point after a long, prosperous epoch known as the Golden Era. This era followed the defeat of the Demon King Ganon and the reunification of the Triforce by the royal family of Hyrule. For a time, a glorious, seemingly stable time, the kingdom flourished under rulers wise enough to wield all three pieces of the sacred relic: the Triforce of Power, the Triforce of Wisdom, and the Triforce of Courage, unified and whole. Think about what that means. The Triforce is the most powerful artifact in all of existence, left behind by the three golden goddesses who created the world itself. In almost every other era of Hyrulean history, the Triforce is fractured, contested, or outright stolen. Wars are fought over it. Curses are born from it. Entire civilizations collapse in pursuit of it. But during the Golden Era, it was simply there, governed by responsible hands, used wisely. It maintained peace. Hyrule Historia describes this as a period where generation after generation, the kings of Hyrule maintained order using all three pieces of the Triforce together, and the kingdom developed and prospered. This isn't something that happened often in Hyrulean history. This was genuinely special. This was the dream, a unified monarchy with the divine power to back it up. And then came the last great king. We don't know his name. The game doesn't give him one, and Zelda Wiki records him simply as the King of Hyrule who preceded the era of decline. But what Hyrule Historia does tell us about him is extraordinary. He was, according to that record, a great king who used the power of the Triforce and was concerned about what would happen to it after his death. That anxiety, that forward-looking dread, is what makes his story so fascinating. Because here is the uncomfortable truth. This king was wise enough to recognize that the Triforce could be misused. He was wise enough to look at his own children, the prince and princess who would inherit his kingdom, and make a devastating assessment. And what he concluded was this: his son, the Prince of Hyrule, was not worthy of the Triforce of Courage. The game's manual says it clearly. The king, in a scroll he left behind, wrote that the Triforce of Courage requires strong character with no evil thoughts. But more than that, an inborn special quality is also necessary. The king concluded, heartbreakingly, that he had not found such a person during his lifetime. Not found such a person, including his own heir. This is where the fracture begins, not with the prince's rage, not with the sorcerer's spell, but with a father who looked at his son and saw something lacking, something that made him choose to hide the most powerful relic in existence rather than risk it falling into that son's hands.
Now, let's pause here, because this decision deserves real examination. Hyrule Historia states this directly. The king was concerned about the prince's character and aptitude, and told the secret of the Triforce to Princess Zelda instead, since he detected that she had a better aptitude than the prince. So let's be precise about what the king actually did. He had two heirs, a prince and a princess. Under any conventional succession logic, the prince, the eldest, the male heir, would inherit the throne and the Triforce as a complete unit. That was presumably the expectation. That was what every generation of the royal family had done before. But this king broke the chain. He decided to split the inheritance. He allowed the prince to ascend to the throne, yes, but he hid the Triforce of Courage, sealed it away in the Great Palace at the Valley of Death on the largest island in Hyrule, and revealed its location only to Princess Zelda. And then he died, without telling his son, without explanation. Imagine being the Prince of Hyrule in that moment. You have just inherited a kingdom, ascended to the throne, and been handed what you believe is your birthright, only to discover that your father bypassed you, that the most precious piece of the divine relic you were supposed to inherit in full was entrusted to your sister instead. Not the kingdom, just the secret, the location, the trust. According to the game's backstory as recorded on Zelda Wiki, when the king passed away, no crest appeared on the hand of the prince, and although he became the new king, he could only inherit the incomplete power of the Triforce. This is a supernatural confirmation of the father's judgment. The very magic woven into the Triforce, designed to manifest as a mark on the hand of someone truly worthy, refused to appear for the prince. The king wasn't just being cautious, he was right. And the prince knew it, and that knowledge burned.
What happens next is a cascade of bad decisions, each one worse than the last. The prince, now king, begins searching frantically for the missing Triforce of Courage. He can feel the incompleteness of his power. He knows what should be his. He knows somewhere deep down that his father looked at him and found him lacking, and rather than accepting that judgment, he becomes consumed by the need to prove it wrong through sheer possession. Then a wizard close to the young king makes a suggestion. He tells the prince that Princess Zelda might know something about the Triforce's location. This is the moment the story turns genuinely dark. Because here is what the prince does. He doesn't go to his sister privately, respectfully, and ask. He doesn't sit with Zelda and have a conversation between siblings about their father's wishes. He brings a magician, a figure of power and intimidation, to interrogate her. The scroll left by the King of Hyrule for Link, recovered in the game, says it plainly. Zelda refused to tell her brother anything, and the magician took over the interrogation. And then the magician threatened her. He threatened to cast a spell of eternal sleep upon the princess if she refused to speak. Even then, with that threat hanging over her head, Princess Zelda said nothing. She refused, absolutely, completely. A young woman facing a wizard's curse, watching her own brother stand by and demand information she had promised her dying father to protect, and she chose to honor that promise. That is a staggering act of courage. And it is important to note, the Triforce of Courage, the very fragment her father entrusted her with the knowledge of, resonates with exactly this kind of character. Unwavering, steadfast, refusing to yield even under the most extreme pressure. The princess had the courage that her brother lacked. The king's judgment was correct. But courage in that moment came at a devastating price.
What happened next depends slightly on which version of events you follow. There are subtle variations between the Japanese Famicom Disk System manual and the international NES release, but the core of the tragedy is consistent. According to Zelda Wiki's account of the game's backstory, the magician, in his rage, cast a sleeping spell upon Princess Zelda, but the spell was more powerful than he could control. The wildly arcing magic killed the wizard outright, even as it sent the princess into her deep and endless slumber. One version of the story suggests the prince attempted to stop the magician once he realized what was happening, that he tried to intervene, to halt the spell. But it was too late. The prince could not stop what he had started. The magician had gone too far, and neither the wizard nor the princess could be brought back from what had been done. The magician was dead. He could not reverse the spell, and Princess Zelda collapsed where she stood and fell into a sleep from which she might never wake. Let the weight of that moment land for a second. The prince had destroyed his sister trying to claim a Triforce fragment that his own father had specifically kept from him for a reason. He had brought a sorcerer into his family's home to intimidate the one person the old king had trusted above all others. He had watched his sister fall under an eternal curse because she refused to betray a promise. And now there was no way to fix it. No wizard to reverse the spell. No magic powerful enough to undo what had been done. The King's Scroll, the backup plan left for a worthy future hero, would explain that only by reuniting the complete Triforce could the sleeping princess be awakened. But the Triforce was fragmented. The piece needed for completion was sealed away in the most dangerous palace in all of Hyrule, and the prince, the man who caused all of this, did not have the character to claim it. He never would.
What the prince did next tells us everything we need to know about him. Filled with remorse, according to Zelda Wiki, the prince had his sister placed in the North Castle, in that sealed room behind a door only the descendants of the royal retainers of the Impa family could open. He placed her on an altar, he sealed the room, and then he made a decree. He ordered that every female child born into the royal household from that day forward should be given the name Zelda. Not to punish them, not out of cruelty, but so that she would not be forgotten. This is, in its own tragic way, the most lasting act of the prince's life. The woman he accidentally condemned to eternal sleep became the name carried by every princess in Hyrulean history. The reason why generation after generation of queens and princesses share that name, the reason why the entire Legend of Zelda series bears the name it does, traces back to one brother's grief and one sister's refusal to break a promise. That decree echoes across centuries. Every time Link rescues a Princess Zelda in any game, every time that name is spoken in the Hyrulean court, they are remembering her. The first one, the one still sleeping in the North Castle, the one whose courage outlasted her brother's ambition and whose tragedy shaped an entire bloodline. Now let's talk about what this tragedy did to the kingdom. The era of decline doesn't begin with Ganon's invasion. It begins here. It begins with this moment, with a king who doubted his heir, a prince who refused to accept that judgment, and a princess frozen in time in the highest room of the North Castle. Because without a worthy ruler to claim the complete Triforce, Hyrule entered a slow, grinding deterioration. According to Hyrule Historia, the Kingdom of Hyrule was once a vast land proud of its glory, but over time it decayed and became but a small kingdom. That's an extraordinary statement. A realm that had stood unified during the Golden Era, that had wielded the full power of the divine Triforce, shrank, contracted, lost territory, lost glory, lost the unified landscape it once commanded. And look at the map of Hyrule in The Adventure of Link and compare it to what the game implies the kingdom once was. Zelda Wiki notes that the Hyrule of this era consists of 2 continents and 2 islands, with 8 towns scattered across a landscape that's far from the unified, singular kingdom the backstory describes. The land is divided, separated by water, requiring travel across seas just to reach different regions of what should be a single nation. This is not the glory of the Golden Era. This is a kingdom that has been gradually fragmenting for generations, losing the coherence it once had when the Triforce was whole and wielded by hands worthy of it. The geography itself reflects the broken bloodline, the scattered palaces across the land, each sealed with crystals that must be restored before the Great Palace can even be accessed. These are the remnants of a royal architecture built during a time of greater power, now locked away and crumbling. Link doesn't just journey across Hyrule in this game, he's traversing the ruins of what Hyrule could have been, should have been, if one prince had simply been worthy of his inheritance.
And then there's the matter of the Triforce of Courage itself, and the extraordinary length the last great king went to in order to protect it. According to the game's manual, quoted on Zelda Wiki, the King's Scroll revealed not just the location of the Triforce of Courage in the Great Palace, but the conditions under which a hero could claim it. The king wrote that a crest would appear on a young man with the right character, someone who has been brought up correctly, has gained many kinds of experiences, and has reached a certain age. This isn't just a lock, this is a filter. The King of Hyrule essentially engineered a system that would select, across all of time, a worthy hero, someone with exactly the qualities he had found absent in his own son. He cast a spell over the entire kingdom so that the Triforce of Courage would remain sealed until that specific type of person appeared. And when Link approaches his 16th birthday, 6 years after defeating Ganon in the events of the first game, that crest appears on the back of his left hand, exactly where the game's backstory said it would. Link carries the Triforce of Courage physically before he even claims it from the Great Palace. The mark itself is the confirmation. He is the one the king's spell was waiting for, the person the dead king could not find in his own lifetime, the person the prince could never be. The contrast is devastating and deliberate. Link is 16 years old, orphaned, unconnected to the royal family, and yet the divine inheritance of courage chose him. The Prince of Hyrule sat on the throne of one of the most powerful kingdoms in history, and the magic passed him by entirely.
When Impa leads Link to the North Castle and opens the sealed door, that moment is charged with all of this accumulated history. Zelda Wiki notes that Impa is described as the nurse of the current Princess Zelda, a descendant of the same retainer family that has guarded the sleeping princess's chamber for generations. The knowledge of this room, this door, this sleeping woman, it has been passed down through the Impa lineage specifically because no one else was supposed to know. And standing there, looking at the altar where the original Princess Zelda lies in her endless sleep, Link reads the king's scroll. He understands the full scope of what he must do. He must take 6 crystals to 6 palaces spread across a fractured Hyrule, restore them to their statues, and lift the binding force sealing the Great Palace. Then he must enter the most dangerous dungeon ever built, defeat its guardians, and claim the Triforce of Courage. All to fix what a prince broke centuries ago. But there is an additional complication, because by the time of the adventure of Link, the threat of Ganon looms over everything. Zelda Wiki confirms that Ganon's minions, the remnants of the army that Ganon commanded before Link defeated him in the first game, are spreading across Hyrule with a single terrifying purpose: to kill Link and pour his blood over Ganon's ashes in order to resurrect their master. So Link isn't just on a quest of restoration, he is simultaneously being hunted. Every enemy he faces in the side-scrolling dungeons of this world is not merely an obstacle, they are soldiers serving a dead king's resurrection, using Link's own quest to travel the land as an opportunity to track him down and destroy him. The stakes couldn't be higher. If Link fails, Ganon returns, the sleeping princess remains asleep, and Hyrule, already a diminished shadow of its former glory, faces the final extinction of whatever remains of the royal line and the Triforce's protection. Now, about the Great Palace itself. Because this dungeon is not just the final challenge of the game, it is the architectural embodiment of everything the Old King stood for. According to Zelda Wiki, the Great Palace is the 7th and final dungeon of the Adventure of Link, situated at the end of the Valley of Death on the largest island in Hyrule. It is sealed by a binding force that will damage any hero who attempts to enter without having first restored all 6 crystals to their respective palaces. 2 hits from that force, according to documented records, are enough to kill Link regardless of how powered up he is. The game manual itself states that the enemies in the palace are those that were made and chosen by the king. They're abnormally strong. This palace wasn't built as a dungeon in the traditional sense, it was built as a test. The king who hid the Triforce of Courage didn't just stash it in a vault. He populated the Great Palace with the strongest guardians imaginable, designed specifically to assess whether the hero reaching for the Triforce truly has what it takes. And what is the final test within those walls? After navigating an enormous labyrinth that dwarfs every previous dungeon in both Adventure of Link games, with winding passageways, multiple levels, treacherous lava pits, and enemies stronger than most bosses, Link faces the Thunderbird, a massive, burning, airborne guardian. A creature of such power that the game demands Link use a specific spell, Thunder, to reveal its weak point before any damage can be dealt at all. But even defeating the Thunderbird is not the final test, because after the Thunderbird falls, Link enters a final room. And there, a wizard is seen making Link's own shadow detach from his body and rise up to face him, Dark Link. This entity, a perfect mirror image of the hero, matching every movement, wielding the same sword and shield, is Link's final opponent before claiming the Triforce of Courage.
And what does that mean symbolically? It means the king's ultimate test of worthiness is not strength, it's not endurance, it's not even strategy. It's the capacity to confront and overcome the darkness within yourself. The Prince of Hyrule could never have passed this test. The very thing that drove him, ambition, entitlement, the inability to accept his father's judgment, is precisely what Dark Link represents: the corruption of the self, the shadow that rises when character fails. Link, who approaches the Triforce of Courage not out of entitlement but out of duty to wake a sleeping woman who has suffered for someone else's sin, defeats his own shadow and earns the right to claim what the old king saved for him.
And when the Triforce is united, all three pieces combined for the first time in this timeline since the Golden Era, Link returns to the North Castle, and Princess Zelda wakes up. Hyrule Historia confirms this explicitly. Link, having obtained the Triforce of Courage, used the Triforce's power to awaken Princess Zelda, from her slumber. He thus prevented Ganon's resurrection and restored peace to the land of Hyrule. Zelda I. That's how she's distinguished in the official record, not by a number or a royal title, by ordinal position in a tragic lineage. The first, the original, the one who started everything. After an unknown number of centuries, potentially an enormous span of time given that the era of decline is described as lasting long enough for the memory of the Triforce of Courage and the tragedy of Princess Zelda to be entirely lost from the kingdom's knowledge, she opens her eyes, and the curse is broken. Think about what she would experience in that moment of waking. The room around her would be the same room she was placed in after the confrontation. She might not even know how much time has passed. She would not know her name has become a law, that every princess born in Hyrule carries her name as a tribute to her refusal to betray her father's trust. She would simply wake up and find Link standing there. The ending of the adventure of Link is brief by modern standards, a short cutscene, a curtain drawing closed. But the emotional weight behind it is enormous. The game shows Link and the now awake Zelda in close proximity, an implication of something tender in the aftermath of an epic quest. It is, according to Zelda Wiki, the first time the series suggests a genuine romantic connection between its two main characters, a quiet moment of warmth after centuries of tragedy.
But let's zoom out one more time and look at what this entire story tells us about the Zelda series as a whole. Because the Sleeping Princess story isn't just backstory, it's thematic architecture. It's the blueprint for one of the Zelda series' most persistent concerns: what happens when someone driven by entitlement gets close to the Triforce? The Prince of Hyrule is one of the earliest examples in the series, chronologically within the Downfall timeline, of what happens when someone without the right character reaches for divine power. He doesn't become Ganon. He doesn't transform into a demon king. He simply becomes a grieving man who destroyed his own sister in pursuit of something he was never meant to hold. And that might be more tragic than Ganon's arc, in a way, because Ganon's ambition is explicit, recognizable, and ultimately confrontable. You can fight Ganon, you can defeat him with the Master Sword and the divine power of the Triforce, but what do you do about a prince whose failing was subtler? Whose evil was not grand, but small and selfish, the evil of a man who couldn't accept that his father didn't trust him. Zelda Wiki notes that Hyrule Historia describes the king as being concerned about the prince's character and aptitude, not that the prince was evil, not that he was malicious, just not good enough, not worthy. And the prince's reaction to learning that judgment, pursuing the Triforce obsessively, enlisting a sorcerer, threatening his own sister, confirmed exactly what the father feared. This theme echoes across Zelda's history. In Ocarina of Time, Ganondorf reaches into the sacred realm, and the Triforce shatters because he does not possess all three virtues. In The Wind Waker, the Triforce of Courage is broken into 8 fragments and scattered across the sea because no hero of appropriate character yet exists to carry it. The Triforce of this series is not a simple power-up. It is a measure. It asks constantly whether the person reaching for it deserves to touch it. The Prince of Hyrule failed that test without ever setting foot in the Great Palace.
The magic the king wove into the land never activated for him. No crest appeared on his hand. The Triforce knew. And Link, the young man who grew up outside the royal family, who earned his character through experience and correct upbringing, as the King's Scroll specifically describes, walked into that final confrontation with the golden mark already glowing on his hand, because the divine relic had already chosen him before the story even began.
There's also something profound to examine in how the prince's tragedy functions as a political catastrophe, not just a personal one. Because the prince didn't just lose his sister, he lost Hyrule's future. With no worthy ruler to claim the Triforce of Courage, the kingdom couldn't maintain the unified governance of the Golden Era. Hyrule Historia describes a gradual contraction, a proud and vast land that shrank over generations into a small kingdom. The towns that dot the landscape of the adventure of Link bear names that, according to Zelda Wiki, would later be used as the names of the sages in Ocarina of Time. But in this era, they're just villages, small, scattered communities in a land that no longer has the central power to hold itself together. And while the prince's remorse, genuine, lasting remorse, is evident in the decree he made about naming all future princesses Zelda, remorse is not redemption. He could not fix what he broke. He could not wake his sister. He could not reclaim the Triforce of Courage because he was never going to have the crest. He could only watch the kingdom he inherited continue its slow, inevitable decline, knowing at every step that the original sin was his. That sealed chamber in the North Castle was not just a place of rest for his sleeping sister. It was a monument to his failure. And the decree he passed, the one naming all princesses Zelda, ensured that every court in every generation after him would carry a constant reminder. Every time a princess was named, every time that name was spoken in the halls of power, it was the prince's grief made permanent. He turned his guilt into law, and that law outlasted everything else he ever did.
One more thread demands attention before we bring this full circle. The game's backstory, as preserved through Zelda Wiki and the Adventure of Link manual, tells us that the memory of the Triforce of Courage and the tragedy of Princess Zelda was eventually lost from Hyrule's cultural knowledge. Over the long centuries of the Era of Decline, as the kingdom contracted and Ganon's forces eventually invaded and the Triforce of Wisdom was shattered into 8 pieces, through all of that chaos, the sleeping princess was forgotten. Not by Impa's family, they remembered. They kept the secret, they guarded the door. But the broader population of Hyrule, the kingdom itself, lost the memory. This is perhaps the most quietly devastating detail of the entire backstory. The prince's decree, all daughters of the royal house shall be named Zelda, was meant to ensure she was never forgotten. And yet, by the time Link and Impa stand outside that sealed door, the reason for the decree has been swallowed by time. The name remained. The story behind the name was gone. It took the appearance of the mark of the Triforce on a 16-year-old orphan's hand to bring the truth back to the surface. It took the king's own contingency magic, activated after an unspecified number of centuries, to create the conditions under which someone would finally discover this sleeping woman on the altar and understand what she represented. The prince wanted her to be remembered. The magic of time nearly erased her anyway, and it was only the Triforce itself, the very artifact his father refused to entrust to him, that ultimately made her salvation possible.
So what does it all mean? The Sleeping Princess of Zelda II is more than a narrative device. She is the axis around which the entire moral architecture of the game, and by extension, the downfall timeline itself, rotates. She is what worthiness looks like. A woman who faced a wizard's curse, watched her own brother demand her compliance, and said no. Not because she was indifferent to the consequences, but because some things, some promises, some trusts, some values are worth more than personal safety. The Triforce of Courage does not respond to the desire for power. It responds to that kind of character, to the willingness to endure rather than compromise.
The prince wanted to be worthy. He thought possession of the Triforce would make him worthy. He had the causality completely backwards. Worthiness is what you demonstrate before the Triforce ever reaches your hands, in the choices you make when the pressure is unbearable and the cost of virtue is enormous. Link passes this test at the end of the Great Palace when he defeats the shadow of himself. Princess Zelda passed this test in the North Castle, long before Link was born, when she refused to speak even as a sorcerer prepared to curse her. The prince failed this test the moment he decided his entitlement outweighed his character, and Hyrule paid for that failure for centuries. There is something deeply hopeful in the ending of the adventure of Link once you understand all of this. When Link lifts the completed Triforce above his head and the sleeping princess finally opens her eyes, when she takes that first breath in what may have been hundreds of years, it isn't just a rescue. It is a resolution of the old king's impossible choice, his decision to hide the Triforce of Courage, to pass its secret only to his daughter, to cast a spell over the entire kingdom waiting for someone worthy to appear. All of it paying off in that single moment when a 16-year-old hero who earned the mark through his character and experiences claims the relic and uses it for exactly the purpose the king intended. A resolution of the prince's grief, the decree he made, the names that were passed down, the door that was sealed and kept sealed for generations, all of it serving its purpose. The princess is found. The princess is saved. The name Zelda will carry a different resonance now. Not just the grief of a brother's failure, but the triumph of a hero's courage and a princess's refusal to be broken. And a resolution of the sleeping princess's own story. She endured. She kept the secret. She was right to trust her father's judgment and refuse to yield. And when the worthy hero finally came, the one who bore the crest her father's magic was always searching for, the curse was undone. The truth of Zelda II's sleeping princess is this: she is not merely a victim. She is not passive. She is not a damsel waiting to be saved. She is, in the deepest sense, the reason salvation was possible at all, because the secret she refused to give up was the secret that kept the Triforce of Courage safe until someone worthy enough to claim it finally arrived. She is the first Zelda. She is the legend. And the entire series, every adventure, every princess, every hero, every sacred relic carries her name, her courage, and her story forward through time. Now you know the dark truth of Zelda II's Sleeping Princess, and it changes everything. Beneath the crushing difficulty of Zelda II, The Adventure of Link, lies a secret that Nintendo never explicitly told players, a dark, fragmented history written in dungeon architecture, enemy placement, and the very structure of Hyrule itself. While millions struggled against Iron Knuckles and fell into Death Mountain's lava pits, they missed the hidden story playing out around them. The Six Palaces aren't just brutal gauntlets designed to punish players, they're archaeological evidence of Hyrule's greatest catastrophe, monuments to a kingdom's desperate last stand. And the truth hidden within their crumbling walls? It rewrites everything we thought we knew about the original Legend of Zelda. Most gamers remember Zelda II as that impossibly hard game that broke controllers and friendships, the side-scrolling black sheep of the franchise. The one that ditched the top-down exploration for platforming challenges that felt more like Castlevania than Zelda. But this reputation has overshadowed something far more important. Zelda II tells the darkest, most consequential story in the entire classic Zelda timeline. The game opens with a shocking revelation that fans often overlook in their rush to complain about difficulty. Link discovers a sleeping Princess Zelda hidden in the North Castle, but she's not the Zelda from the first game. This is an ancient princess from Hyrule's distant past, cursed into eternal slumber by a wizard spell after refusing to reveal the location of the Triforce. Already, the narrative is screaming at players that something terrible happened in Hyrule's history, something so catastrophic that it was deliberately hidden and forgotten.
Link's quest isn't about rescuing this sleeping beauty, it's about obtaining the Triforce of Courage to break her curse. But here's where the story becomes brilliant in its subtlety. To acquire this third piece of the Triforce, Link must venture into 6 ancient palaces scattered across a Hyrule that's radically different from the first game. These palaces aren't new constructions, they're ruins, ancient defensive structures from an era when Hyrule faced extinction. The first palace, situated in the shadow of Death Mountain, immediately establishes the narrative framework that the entire game builds upon. Parappa Palace appears relatively accessible compared to what comes later, but its very existence raises questions. Why would ancient Hylians build a palace in such a dangerous location? Why surround it with enemies and traps? The answer becomes clear when examining the palace's architecture and defenders. Inside Parappa Palace, players encounter Stalfosh Knights, Moblins, and the intimidating Red Iron Knuckle, all arranged in defensive formations. These aren't random enemy placements, they're strategic positions designed to repel invaders. The palace wasn't built as a tomb or treasure vault, it was constructed as a fortress. Ancient Hyrule was under siege, and these palaces served as the kingdom's last line of defense against an overwhelming threat. The candle obtained in Parappa Palace isn't just a gameplay item allowing access to darker areas, it's a symbolic torch passed from the ancient defenders to Link himself. The ability to illuminate darkness represents the very purpose of these palaces, to preserve light and knowledge against the encroaching shadows that threatened to consume Hyrule. Every item Link acquires tells part of this forgotten history. Death Mountain itself becomes a crucial piece of the puzzle when examined closely. In the original Legend of Zelda, Death Mountain is a perilous area, but in Zelda II, it's absolutely infested with enemies. The mountain range dominates the northern region of Hyrule, creating a natural barrier that the ancient kingdom had to fortify. Medoro Palace, hidden within these treacherous peaks, represents the second layer of Hyrule's defensive strategy. Medoro Palace introduces the hammer, and this isn't coincidental. The hammer allows Link to break through barriers and obstacles that previously blocked his path, literally shattering the remnants of ancient fortifications. But notice what the hammer reveals: more palaces, more ruins, more evidence of a civilization that built layer upon layer of defenses. Hyrule wasn't just threatened, it was desperate. The geography itself tells a story that links to the original game in fascinating ways. Between the first Legend of Zelda and Zelda II, Hyrule's landscape has dramatically changed. New towns have appeared: Rauru, Ruto, Saria, Mido, Naburu, Darunia. These aren't random names, they would later become the names of the sages in Ocarina of Time. The towns represent pockets of civilization clinging to survival in a hostile land, each one a beacon of hope in a world still recovering from catastrophe. But the palaces themselves reveal the true scope of what Hyrule survived. As Link ventures to the Island Palace, accessible only by crossing the sea, the narrative implications become staggering. Why would the ancient kingdom hide a palace on a remote island? The answer is chilling. They were running out of safe places to hide the Triforce pieces. The threat they faced was so overwhelming that they scattered their most sacred relics to the furthest corners of the known world.
The Island Palace introduces environmental hazards that previous palaces only hinted at. Lava pits, collapsing bridges, enemies that swarm in coordinated attacks. These aren't just difficulty spikes, they're archaeological evidence of how the ancient kingdom fell. The palaces show escalating desperation in their defensive design. The builders knew that earlier defenses had failed, so each subsequent palace incorporated lessons learned from devastating defeats. Maze Island Palace takes this evolution even further. Hidden in a labyrinth so complex that finding it requires the fairy spell to navigate through impossibly narrow passages, this palace represents paranoia and desperation elevated to architectural form. The ancient builders didn't just want to hide the Triforce piece, they wanted to make it impossible to find. They created puzzles within puzzles, traps within traps, knowing that conventional defenses had proven insufficient. The enemies within Maze Island Palace tell their own story. Blue Iron Knuckles, stronger and faster than their red counterparts, suggest that whatever threat Hyrule faced was adapting. The defenders had to constantly innovate, creating more powerful guardians for each palace. Skull heads floating through corridors, seemingly immune to conventional attacks, hint at the supernatural nature of Hyrule's enemy. This wasn't an invasion by moblins or conventional forces. This was an assault by dark magic itself. The spells Link learns throughout his journey — shield, jump, life, fairy, fire, reflect, spell, thunder — aren't just gameplay mechanics. They're the accumulated magical knowledge of Hyrule's greatest wizards, preserved in towns and hidden locations, specifically so that a future hero could access them. Each spell represents a magical breakthrough achieved during the crisis, techniques developed out of necessity when conventional weapons proved inadequate. Consider the downward thrust and upward thrust techniques taught by knight statues in various towns. These aren't standard sword techniques, they're specialized combat forms developed to counter specific enemy types. The ancients learned through bitter experience that iron knuckles are vulnerable to downward attacks, that certain flying enemies require upward strikes. These techniques are lessons written in blood, preserved so that future defenders wouldn't have to relearn them through countless deaths. The Three-Eye Rock Palace, hidden in a swamp and accessible only through specific knowledge, represents another desperate measure. Swamps are naturally difficult to navigate, offering protection through terrain itself. But the ancient builders went further, concealing the palace entrance behind landmarks that only those with specific knowledge could interpret. This suggests that by this point in the crisis, Hyrule's defenders had to consider the possibility of betrayal. They couldn't trust that everyone would fight for the kingdom, so they hid the palaces in ways that required secret knowledge to access. Inside this palace, the difficulty spikes again. Enemies attack in complex patterns, environmental hazards become more lethal, and the path forward becomes increasingly non-obvious. But look at what this reveals about the historical timeline. Each palace shows more desperation than the last. They weren't built simultaneously as part of a grand defensive plan. They were constructed sequentially, each one a response to the failure of previous defenses. The ancient kingdom was losing, and they knew it. The Great Palace represents the final, most desperate measure imaginable. Located in the eastern reaches of Hyrule, accessible only after obtaining all previous treasures and defeating all previous guardians, this massive structure is less a palace and more a fortress city. Its sheer size dwarfs all previous palaces. Its complexity makes earlier dungeons look like practice runs. And its defenders, the absolute most powerful enemies in the entire game, tell us exactly what this palace was designed to protect. The Triforce of Courage, the final piece needed to complete the sacred relic and awaken the sleeping princess, rests within the Great Palace. But why this piece specifically? The Triforce of Power and Wisdom already existed in the world. Ganon possessed power in the original game, and Zelda held wisdom. Courage was hidden, deliberately removed from circulation and locked away in the most secure location the ancient kingdom could create. This suggests something profound about Hyrule's ancient crisis. The threat they faced specifically targeted the Triforce of Courage. Perhaps the enemy sought to break the will of Hyrule's defenders, to eliminate the very concept of heroic resistance. By hiding courage itself, the ancient kingdom ensured that even if they fell, even if their civilization crumbled, the potential for future heroes would survive. The Great Palace isn't just a dungeon, it's a time capsule of hope. The enemies guarding the Great Palace reveal the catastrophic nature of what Hyrule survived. Blue Iron Knuckles patrol in groups, no longer isolated challenges, but coordinated threats. Flying enemies swarm in patterns that require perfect technique to overcome. The palace itself seems alive with malice, every corridor a death trap, every room a potential dead end. This architecture screams of a kingdom making its final stand, throwing every defensive measure they possessed into one last desperate fortification.
And then there's Thunderbird, the palace's guardian boss. This isn't a corrupted guardian or twisted defender, it's a primordial force of destruction, a creature of pure magical energy. Its very presence in the palace suggests that the ancient threat Hyrule faced wasn't entirely mortal. The kingdom battled forces beyond conventional warfare, enemies that could only be sealed away, never truly defeated. Finally, at the Great Palace's heart, Link faces Dark Link, his own shadow. This encounter has spawned countless theories, but examined through the lens of the palace's historical purpose, it takes on new meaning. The final guardian isn't an external threat, it's a test of the hero's own courage. The ancient builders understood that acquiring the Triforce of Courage required more than strength or magical power. It demanded absolute self-mastery. Only someone who could defeat their own darkness deserved to wield courage itself. When Link finally claims the Triforce of Courage and the complete Triforce awakens the sleeping princess, the full scope of the historical narrative becomes clear. This ancient Zelda refused to reveal the Triforce's location even under threat of eternal sleep. Her curse wasn't punishment, it was her choice. She chose to become a living seal, ensuring that the Triforce of Courage remained hidden until a worthy hero emerged. The wizard who cursed her, the king's advisor who sought the Triforce's power, represents the internal corruption that often precedes external collapse. Hyrule didn't just face invasion, it faced betrayal from within. The wizard's treachery forced the king to scatter the Triforce, to create the elaborate palace system, to effectively destroy his own kingdom's cohesion in order to save its soul. This recontextualizes the entire original Legend of Zelda. When Ganon invades in that game, he's not attacking a thriving kingdom, he's attacking the ruins of a civilization still recovering from an ancient catastrophe. Hyrule was already broken, already scattered, already operating from a position of weakness. Zelda 1's 8 dungeons, Ganon's conquest, Link's heroic journey, all of it takes place in a kingdom still haunted by its darkest hour. The sleeping Princess Zelda in the North Castle isn't just a damsel to rescue, she's a living monument to Hyrule's ancient sacrifice. Her awakening represents the kingdom finally reclaiming its lost courage, finally healing from wounds inflicted generations before Link was even born. The curse's breaking doesn't just save one princess, it symbolically completes Hyrule's recovery from existential threat. Notice how the towns in Zelda II have names that would become the sages in Ocarina of Time. Rauru, Ruto, Saria, Mido, Naboru, Darunia. This isn't coincidence, it's Nintendo establishing deep lore connections. These towns represent the survivors of the ancient catastrophe, communities founded by or named after the very individuals who would become legendary in their own right. The seeds of Hyrule's future greatness were planted in its darkest hour. The magic containers, heart containers, and experience system in Zelda 2 aren't just RPG mechanics, they represent Link growing stronger by retracing the paths of ancient heroes. Every level gained, every stat increased, every new spell learned brings him closer to the power level required to survive what the ancient kingdom barely endured. The game's notorious difficulty is actually canonical. Hyrule's ancient crisis was so severe that only the strongest possible hero could hope to resolve its lingering consequences. The palace's placement across Hyrule reveals strategic thinking that makes sense only in context of desperate defensive warfare. Death Mountain palaces control the northern approaches, island palaces defend against sea-based threats, swamp palaces guard the wetlands, eastern palaces protect the kingdom's heartland. This isn't random distribution, it's a defensive perimeter established by military strategists who knew exactly where threats would emerge. The hammer, raft, flute, boots, cross, and magical key aren't just tools for exploration, they're keys to understanding how the ancient kingdom functioned. The hammer breaks barriers, suggesting Hyrule once maintained strict territorial boundaries. The raft crosses water, implying maritime trade and travel networks. The flute summons help, revealing communication systems that spanned great distances. Each item represents infrastructure that existed before the catastrophe destroyed the kingdom's cohesion. Enemy types throughout the game tell their own historical story. Moblins, Octoroks, and Levers appear in Zelda 1 and Zelda 2, suggesting these creatures survived the ancient catastrophe and remained threats throughout Hyrule's history. But Zelda 2 introduces new enemies, Aches, Bots, Foka, Moa, creatures that might represent mutations or corruptions born from the magical chaos of the ancient war.
The world itself bears scars from what Hyrule endured. The distinction between Zelda II's overworld and palace interiors becomes symbolically important. The overworld uses a top-down perspective, similar to the first game, representing the known world, the surface reality that players and NPCs understand. But entering a palace shifts to side-scrolling perspective, literally changing the viewing angle.
This could represent descending into historical layers, exploring depths of the past that surface dwellers can no longer access. The palaces exist in a different dimension of understanding, accessible only to those brave enough to confront history directly. Boss battles in each palace follow an interesting progression that mirrors Hyrule's defensive evolution. Horsehead in Parapa Palace is straightforward, a mounted knight representing conventional military defense. Helmet Head in Midoro Palace is similar but stronger, showing adaptation. Rebenak in Island Palace combines horse and foot combat, representing tactical flexibility. Karok in Maze Island Palace uses teleportation and magic, showing supernatural countermeasures. Guma in Ocean Palace is a massive brute, representing desperate deployment of overwhelming force. Barba in Three Eye Rock Palace is a dragon, suggesting the ancient kingdom resorted to mythological weapons. Each boss represents an escalation in defensive measures. The Link doll item, obtained from a hidden location, allows Link to create a dummy that enemies attack instead of him. This seemingly minor item actually reveals sophisticated magical deception tactics developed during the Ancient Crisis. Hyrule's defenders learned to create illusions, to misdirect enemies, to fight smart rather than strong. These weren't just warriors, they were tactical innovators forced to develop unconventional solutions to survive overwhelming odds. The existence of Error and Bagu, NPCs who provide crucial help through unconventional means, suggests that even during or after the catastrophe, Hyrule maintained hidden networks of helpers and secret knowledge keepers. These aren't random townspeople, they're descendants or successors to individuals who preserved critical information through the kingdom's darkest times. Their casual demeanor masks their crucial role in maintaining continuity with the ancient past. The Great Palace's music alone tells a story. It's not just challenging gameplay music, it's ominous, foreboding, heavy with the weight of history. Composers rarely get credit for narrative contribution, but Zelda II's soundtrack perfectly captures the atmosphere of exploring ancient ruins filled with desperate last stands. Each palace theme becomes progressively darker, matching the escalating historical desperation revealed through architecture and enemy placement.
When Link finally completes his quest and awakens the ancient princess, the Triforce appears complete and glowing. But think about what this means historically. For the first time in possibly centuries, the Triforce is whole again. The ancient king scattered it to prevent misuse. Ganon sought it in the first game. Only now, through Link's heroic journey through the palaces, does Hyrule finally possess its sacred relic intact. This completion represents more than one hero's achievement. It symbolizes Hyrule's civilization reaching a point of recovery where they can once again be trusted with ultimate power. The kingdom has matured, learned from past mistakes, survived its trials. The Sleeping Princess awakening isn't just a happy ending, it's Hyrule reclaiming its heritage, stepping out of the shadow of ancient catastrophe and into a new era. The game's infamous difficulty serves the narrative in ways rarely acknowledged. Players experience firsthand the brutal challenges that Hyrule's ancient defenders faced. Every death to an Iron Knuckle, every fall into lava, every failure in the Great Palace makes players feel the desperate odds the ancient kingdom overcame. Zelda II doesn't just tell a story of ancient struggle, it makes players live it. This recontextualization transforms Zelda II from that weird hard Zelda game into one of the franchise's most ambitious narrative experiments. Nintendo didn't just create a challenging sequel, they crafted an archaeological mystery where the dungeons themselves are primary sources, where enemy placement is historical documentation, where every gameplay element contributes to world building.
The palaces aren't just levels to complete, they're monuments to Hyrule's greatest crisis and most heroic sacrifice. Each one stands as testimony to a civilization that refused to surrender, that hid its most precious treasures, not in grand displays of wealth, but in fortified tombs designed to outlast any catastrophe. The ancient Hylians knew they might fall, but they ensured their legacy would survive for a worthy hero to discover. Link's journey through these palaces isn't just adventure, it's inheritance. He receives the accumulated knowledge, power, and wisdom of an entire civilization's final desperate defense. The spells, items, and techniques aren't just power-ups, they're ancestral gifts, tools crafted in necessity and preserved in hope. Every palace cleared represents another chapter of Hyrule's hidden history reclaimed from oblivion. The sleeping princess represents Hyrule's lost courage, literally sealed away until the kingdom was ready to reclaim it. Her curse wasn't tragedy, it was insurance. By choosing eternal sleep over revealing the Triforce's location, she ensured that courage would remain protected through the kingdom's darkest hours. Her awakening signals that those dark hours have finally ended. So the next time someone dismisses Zelda II as just a difficult black sheep, remember the intricate historical narrative woven into every palace, every enemy, every item. This game tells the story of Hyrule's apocalypse and recovery through environmental storytelling decades before that term became industry standard. It rewards careful observation and thoughtful analysis in ways that pure combat challenge never could. The true history of Zelda II's palaces isn't found in instruction manuals or explicit dialogue. It's written in architecture, preserved in enemy formations, encoded in item placement. It's a story that demands players look beyond surface difficulty to see the narrative brilliance underneath. And for those willing to explore these ancient ruins with eyes open to their historical significance, Zelda II reveals itself as one of the most sophisticated storytelling achievements in classic gaming. The adventure of Link indeed, but also the adventure of ancient Hyrule, preserved in stone and shadow, waiting for heroes brave enough to uncover its secrets.